Hey everyone. Welcome back for the third and final part of What If Naruto Wanted to Be the Greatest. As always, huge thanks to all of my Patreons. Making these videos would be impossible without you guys' support, especially given the limitations and restrictions YouTube imposes on my type of content. After you finish this one, there is about 20 other stories you can enjoy over there. Also, feel free to send me any messages over there if you have any questions or even if you just want to chat. Link to all of that will be in the description. Anyways, everyone, enjoy the video. Chapter 11. Guren glanced at Naruto and then looked ahead. She still couldn't figure out the blonde. Strong with obviously hidden agendas. She wouldn't bat an eye to say he had something which Konoha would probably not agree with. If he suddenly departed the village, she wouldn't be shocked either. There was something in his mind that he didn't want to show anyone and she was dying to know that. But she couldn't ask the questions because the damn Hyuga kept an eye on her. He was as frustrating as her lack of action. It was war and yet she hadn't been able to brutalize and murder anyone. She needed to release this energy she felt from within. You do know that I can tell you're staring at me with negative thoughts, Neji stated, his tone cold. He wasn't even looking at Guren but at the trees ahead. Guren very much minded the slow pace. If they were quicker, they would have reached their enemy and she would have been doing a good she was proud to complete. I wasn't hiding my dislike of you. Guren replied indifferently. Besides, you are in the way. Of what? Neji asked with narrowed eyes. Her quality time with me, Naruto answered with a look of amusement. The real story was on Guren's curiosity over his thoughts. The thoughts he had yet to share with her. Don't be full of yourself. I don't think she really likes you, Neji said to Naruto. The blonde was often trying something cheeky. But Guren was always forceful in her response. He knew, Naruto was only just amusing himself but there was a lingering thought from a lost part of him that said the blonde may have some seriousness in him. Relationships? Neji had never thought of such things. There were bigger things to worry about. He was still growing. He could think about those matters at the right time. Either way, it didn't change the fact that there were those in his age group who had already started. Given his role in the Hyuga, he couldn't do as he pleased either. I'm starting to think so as well. But oh well, I did try. The worst thing you can do for yourself is waving the white flag without even trying. You'll always kill yourself thinking if I'd tried, she could have said yes. There is finality in that. But some people do prefer to excite themselves in such hopes of not knowing. A new name for cowards? Naruto asked with a raised eyebrow. People protect themselves in different ways. A coward was a coward. But perhaps he wasn't the one to judge the lifestyle of others. People dealt with situations differently. They coped differently. If their methods worked to preserve their happiness, sanity, who was he to question it? Cowards were the ones to live longer anyway. The brave died young. They were the ones who jumped into pits of scorching flames. The other group was always cautious. Don't we have important issues to discuss other than how people react to situations? Guren asked. They were at war and moving towards an army and these two were busy about a pointless subject. Are you really itching for battle that much? Of course I am. Neji shook his head. He hadn't seen it but just the way she spoke, he had concluded Guren was a sadistic person. It was what you expected from someone who made Orochimaru lunch and kissed the very ground he walked on. What was surprising about it was that Naruto seemed to be able to get along with her. With the blonde's moral code, he'd thought such a thing would be difficult but here they were. Unless of course, Naruto was only tolerating it because he had another agenda. If the Jinchuriki is in place, we have to try to do something to separate her from others. If she occupies us, we won't be able to deal with the Kumo forces. Which are our biggest concern. Neji glanced at Naruto. Can you figure of a way to keep her away? Yugito had some others had separated from the main company. Naruto knew that. He had used Sage Mode to detect this much, hence a change of direction and the slow pace. Not at the spot. But we only have to stop them from crossing the border. We don't have to do anything extreme. What was he saying? Nothing extreme? There was no time for kindness. If they just told them to go back, they were going to come back with an even bigger force. Naruto amazed himself. Even at this time, he was still capable of such a naive way of thinking. When was he going to grow up and learn that there was a way that things have to done? They had to stop Kumo from crossing the borders and that was their role. The people they were going to face weren't going to be kind to them. Naruto just hoped he wouldn't come across any of the people Yugito had with her when he confronted Kumo Shinobi before. There would be sparks. When you kill someone, their friends always thought of vengeance. In this life, you kill and you will have other people trying to kill you. Separating them would be easy. Naruto modified his response. Once we move closer, we'll be able to tell if she is with them or not. I hope she isn't so we can handle things quickly and join other battles. I'm sure the others are having a hard time. We are stretched. Guren sighed. She felt like she had joined a losing team. Konoha already engaged 2 enemies in 2 fronts, great nations each with 2 Jinchuriki. It was going to take some doing to win with those odds staked against them. She wasn't about to sacrifice her life and leave Yukimaru to the mercy of the leaf. Do you think we can win? Everyone is always confident they will win. Neji replied. But in war, everyone loses something. I suppose in your case, you're worried about whether you'll make it out alive. Nobody can make that guarantee, but we hope that we will see the end of this, Naruto said confidently. You're not allowed to flee from battle. And get hunted? You forget that Yukimaru is still at Konoha. Naruto smiled. A hostage situation, huh? No, thanks to you. Guren glared. If you had fought me fairly, things wouldn't have gone the way they did. I have never seen anyone who cries as much as you do just because you lost a fight, Naruto replied with a shake of his head. Regardless, we simply have to do the best we can and make sure we come out alive. C came to a halt. He knew they were heading straight to a couple of chakra signatures. Powerful ones at that. But he hadn't thought one of them would be this powerful to make even him uncomfortable. And he was usually hanging out in the presence of Jinchuriki. Perhaps they shouldn't have separated from Daru and Yugito. But the man had been called by the Raikage and Yugito accompanied him. She was supposed to be moving back toward them. But at this rate, they were going to engage before she returned to them. Something wrong? Samui asked carefully. There were men behind them. On her leadership they trusted. Yeah, C nodded. It is just 3 of them, he frowned. Why send only 3 to face an army? Kumo would only do something like that if it was B or Yugito, but perhaps Konoha's Jinchuriki was among the 3. It could explain the large chakra reserve. Just 3? Samui was worried now. Konoha has always had those powerful shinobi. She didn't want to face a problem now. Not when they just started their march. She smiled. What was she thinking? This was a war, not a joy ride where she picked and chopped which routes and pieces would disturb her. Nothing was of choice. If the enemy moved, they too had to move. You didn't pick your opponents. Sometimes, you just picked which shinobi had to be sent to die. She had been warned such decisions would have to be taken. This was no time for emotions. No time for being nice. There was no honor in war. Only winners and losers. How far are they? Not far. And Yugito? Not far. C replied. They appear to have just slowed their pace as if they are not in a hurry. They've been coming toward us, so I'd imagine they also have a sensor. If there had been a scout who was relaying information to them, C would have sensed them. It was apparent that they couldn't avoid their opponents. Let's prepare for battle here, she ordered. And then turned to get everyone to focus. Their enemies would be approaching. Just so you know, one of them might be a Jinchuriki. Konoha Jinchuriki. It was Naruto. The same person who killed Amoe after lecturing them. Kairo wasn't going to be pleased to see him. He was powerful. Facing him without Yugito would be suicidal. He'd been smart enough to take a Jinchuriki from their hands and then flee without getting drawn into battle. Samui glanced toward Kairo and the men. If they arrived first, they had no other choice but to attack. No, they couldn't let them get to them without making plans for them. They had to set up ambushes for them. Let's make a plan to slow them down until Yugito arrives. We do not want to face a Jinchuriki. Sensing movement on the left, up from the trees, Guren slammed her left foot on the ground. A man jumped from the tree, lunging toward them. A crystal spear sprouted from the ground and skewered the man. It just pierced through his abdomen. But the man wasn't dead, yet. Even as his blood decorated the crystal. He hurled something toward the group. A smoke bomb. It went off, forcing the 3 to jump into the trees. They didn't allow themselves to be separated. They jumped into the trees, with Guren glaring at him. How do we get ambushed when we have a sensor? Naruto shrugged. I'm not switched on. You should be asking the all-seeing Byakugan why he isn't watching our shoulders. I didn't know I was supposed to be your guard. He is feigning memory loss, Guren replied. So, leader, what should we do? There was a hint of sarcasm in her tone. But she was still serious. After all, he was the leader of this team. He activated his Byakugan and looked around, searching for traps, the number of enemies that they faced. It shouldn't have happened. But Naruto was the one who decided they should slow down. He didn't want to suspect that Naruto had them slowed down just for something like this to happen. After all, If the blonde had kept his sage mode, he would have sensed this attack coming. And they would have been able to dismiss it. Given that they were not attacking, it seemed like their mission was just to stall them for a little while. If they planned on really ambushing them, the attacks would have come already. Neji glanced at Naruto with questioning look. If they were stalling, they must be something they are waiting for. This isn't exactly an ambush, he said. Does it matter? They are the enemy and we must deal with them. Just be silent for a moment, Neji shut up Guren. The woman glared at him but he dared her to add anything in response. They are likely looking to stall. If so, why? We must know that before we decide to engage them. Naruto sighed. Well, it couldn't be avoided. They are likely waiting for a Jinchuriki to join them. They must have a sensory type of shinobi among them. Neji narrowed his eyes. Then this is the best chance for us to attack them before the Jinchuriki joins them. He turned to Guren. Deal with them quickly. There are about 15 of them hiding in the trees. We want to quickly move ahead. Where are they? Neji pointed ahead. They are not really separated from each other. Small fish sent to sacrifice themselves, Guren said before creating 5 crystal clones. Let us just move ahead. The clones will deal with them. I want to face the main stars rather than wasting energy of sacrificial lambs. Last time, Neji thought. This was the last time he wanted to be teamed up with this woman. She just wanted to fight and inflict pain on people before killing them. She didn't care about anything or the bigger picture. She really wasn't a Konoha shinobi. There were a few bad people, but she took the cake. Tenten felt a little bit of nausea flying over thousands of shinobi forces. Iwa was just below them. She on a bird that could be hit by anything. If that happened, she would be hitting deck and no doubt, she would end up getting butchered, that is if she survived the fall. She glanced at Sai, who looked so comfortable with flying she wouldn't think that he was riding above enemy lines. Do we have to so high? If we go lower, we risk getting noticed. We don't know if they have sensory type of shinobi or not. It was merely a precaution. Nobody was surely looking up for shinobi. Konoha wasn't known for such attacks. Kakashi had explained that this was a tactic that had made the Sky Nation very powerful. Shinobi were not used to anything flying and thus didn't have protections against aerial attacks. Iwa was however familiar with flying shinobi. Their cage have had the ability after all. Sai had never thought that Kakashi would actually come with this kind of strategy. It was something he thought only Danzo could imagine. The Jonin was a nice person. But then again, this was war and Konoha was stretched fighting on 2 fronts with 4 Baijuu to potentially fight against versus their 1. Obviously, they had to use tactics. Get ready. Tenten nodded and unrolled her scroll. Kunai wrapped with explosive tags were sealed within her sealing scroll. Sai had a similar one. But he was also going to use his own jutsu to make things happen. Hold on tightly. We're going to be moving quickly to spread around. Got it. Tenten didn't waste time on Sai's signal. The kunai started to fall like rain. She just kept on dropping them, without glancing at Sai as the bird sped through the moving forces of Iwa. It became chaos when they started to notice the projectiles. A chain of explosion followed the moment they noticed. They had to set them off. She didn't look down. She couldn't afford to look down. There were people there. And she couldn't count the number of kunai she dropped. All of them exploding not at once but in a chain. One after the other. She heard the cries. The screams as each explosion went through. This was war. Nobody ever signed up for something like that. It could have been her down there. She could have been there, running for cover. Only to step into an exploding kunai. They were right when they said war was not pleasant for anyone. Tenten glanced at Sai as they raced to safety. He didn't look shook. His expression never changed. She couldn't compare to him. They went back to where Sai had taken her, Guy's group. Upon landing, Tenten felt sick. Perhaps it was all the flying. Sai just jumped off. Then again, it was a normal thing for him. Sai didn't say anything to Tenten. There was no need to say anything. He had a mission and that was to report to Yamato about what was happening on the other side. The man was waiting for him at the center of the camp. You returned. Senpai's plan went according to plan? Sai nodded. It should leave them scrambling for cover and force them to move back. Those who survived at least. Yamato nodded. But they still needed to get into Kuza. And they had to see any of Iwa's Jinchuriki. If they showed up, it was going to be trouble. There would be much loss on the side of Konoha. And there was no intel on how Naruto was doing. No, they couldn't expect the blonde to be fighting at all battlefields. They had to pull their weight. Where is he? He has decided to sneak into the capital to check the situation. He went in with Sakura and some others. He will give an instruction once things are secure. He is moving dangerously. The other unit didn't fare well. He had to take the extraordinary step, Sai answered. Not everyone was winning. And not everyone was losing. You won some and you lost some. A strange concept he was adopting here. With Danzo, failure was not tolerated. I'm going to collect some tags before launching another attack. But this will be on Kumo. Iwa will have become clever to this but not Kumo. Naruto stared at a clearing ahead. The enemy was lying in wait. There was need to say anything. They just had to go in and attack without any mercy. But their numbers were a little too much. Not even Guren was willing to jump into that battle. She would get worn out before finishing it and they would just end up killing her. They needed to trim down the numbers. Was there a need to even just trim the numbers? They just had to stop them, and he could go full out and just lay waste to the battlefield. There would be no need to fight. A quick end. A quick death. Yet, a part of him wanted to speak to these people. He wanted to see how Samui reacted to his presence without giving Guren the chance to practice her sadism. He shook his head. He was not the one making the decisions here. The leader was Neji. He would decide. And at this rate, Naruto didn't feel like making an argument for any particular strategy. He just wanted to end it all as soon as he could. How far is the Jinchuriki? Neji asked. Not far. She is moving in too quickly. Naruto thought Yugito had already put on the armor of her Baiju's power to increase her speed. A rematch, huh? Neji studied the battlefield with his Byakugan. He never thought he'd be in a position to make an order for Naruto to go loose. But this was the only choice. Konoha was already stretched. They had to go and join other battles. If they could reduce this army before Yugito arrived, it would make things easy. He deactivated his Byakugan. I don't have to tell you what must happen. Konoha needs us in other battles. We need to move out as quickly as possible. The only way to do so is to handle this as quickly as possible. In the most brutal way possible, huh? Naruto asked. He had his back pressed against a tree. He was ready for such. There was no time for anything sentimental. Are you going to go alone? Guren asked. You want to join me? Of course. As long as you watch my back. Can't promise that. But you can join if you want. I'll have to do a little bit of damage first. He closed his eyes. Yugito wasn't going to get here before he did that. He'd been hoping she'd be around and he could force them to turn back. That would have just been misplaced kindness. But a decision B could have taken. He laughed inwardly. Naive even at this stage? Perhaps the Kyuubi was right and wasn't ready for anything. Don't move. But Guren, watch Neji for a moment. They just won't leave you two alone. Some shinobi may come after you. I have taken that into consideration. He is coming, she shouted. Samui took a stance. 1,000 men behind her and just one man coming to face them. It was a laughable situation. But this was the advantage of a Jinchuriki. They had to face through this situation. If this was a normal battle, there may have been room for negotiations, but this was war. There was no talking with the enemy until they have either surrendered or become cornered like a rat. Get ready. She raised her sword, getting ready for anything. She hoped it would not be that mist anymore. It was a dangerous mist that filled everyone with hallucinations. Unlike Genjutsu, they were a bit tricky to escape. Naruto was running toward them, alone. She watched him charge ahead, an expressionless mask on his face. He didn't just lunge at them. He disappeared from sight in a blur. Above, she shouted, having followed the blonde by tracking his chakra. Naruto closed his eyes. Kyuubi. The crimson chakra of the Kyuubi burst out while he was floating above the enemy lines. A large cloud of smoke occurred. A frightening roar caused the men below to scatter. 9 tails blasted the smoke away, as the monstrously huge beast crashed down. It landed on some men. Its paws crushing whatever was within it. The Baiju lifted its right paw, slammed it into a group of shinobi. They were sent flying along with debris, alive, dead and broken. The process was repeated 3 times. He then swept through the ground. It peeled chunks of earth, along with many shinobi. They could only cry, and try to jump away as the Kyuubi cleaned everything caught in its sweeping paw. Its tail swung wildly in some swift motions, giving rise to powerful gusts of wind. The powerful gusts propelled wide, slamming onto crowds of shinobi. They were sent into the air, flying away as if they were flies. Samui could only watch as the monster wasted the battlefield. It was just crushing and swatting away her men as they were nothing. It didn't even make a sound. See, she said to the Jonin beside her. See. See turned to Samui. How was anyone supposed to fight that? The Kyuubi just brushed off any attack that hit it. It was just doing what it wanted. Trying to fight was just a hopeless exercise. Was this what other people experienced when they were fighting B? It was only then that C realized why Samui was calling her. There was chakra that was starting to fill the entire area. What was it, Ash? They'd been so absorbed in seeing the Kyuubi and trying to avoid it that they didn't realize that this wasn't the main attack, but a diversion. This was Naruto's chakra. The ashes were obscured by the rising dust the Baijuo was making in its rampage. Order everyone to clear. C shouted, and then the Kyuubi disappeared in a puff of smoke. Boom. The horror. Both C and Samui managed to jump away along with a couple of hundred of shinobi when flames exploded in their midst. The intense flames created turned out like sea of scorching inferno. Many more were caught within the flames. When C landed a distance away, his eyes narrowed, widened a second later. The moment he landed, a kunai pierced through his chest from behind. It had been hurled at him with incredible speed that he couldn't avoid it. The kunai pierced through his chest, leaving a gaping hole, blood gushing out. He fell on his knees, wretched in pain, and then threw a fit of coughs. See. Samui rushed toward him. She was going to lose another one of her friends. Just like that. Where was Yugito at this point? Medic. She was calling for one, but seeing the hole on his chest, she knew it was hopeless. This was an attack that had been aimed to kill him. They must have realized he was the censor and decided to take him out. A cruel strategy, but a good one. Only for the enemy at least. Would you go back to Kumo if I told you to do so? Samui twisted around, seeing Naruto slowly walk toward them. He had killed so many of them and he was asking them to leave? And why that damn look on his face? He looked almost sad even when there was nothing but steel in his tone. At this point, there isn't much of choice. Samui replied bitterly. It was only when in such a situation could any message go through. The winning party obviously used their standing to force issues. But for them, attempting to fight anymore without Yugito would simply be to digging their graves. Are we going to just let him walk away? Kairo asked through gritted teeth. Look at what he has done? Look at C. Naruto smiled sadly seeing Kairo. He could understand her anger. But it was only going to get her killed. He held out his right hand. If I do let you go back, as long as the war continues, you're just going to go regroup and try again. The best option would be to eliminate you right here and now, Naruto said in a cold tone. Guren landed beside him. I thought you'd never ask for me. I was getting bored watching you have all the fun, she said with a wide grin. Lock them up in a crystal prison. Why? We can finish them. Now, Naruto said forcefully. Guren knew there was something up. Both she and Naruto jumped back to create some distance. As she was jumping, she did hand seals. When she touched down, she slammed her hands to the ground. Naruto didn't get to watch the crystal rise from the group. He was alerted to movement and only turned his head to this right. He met Yugito's foot. It slammed on his face with the strength of Guy. The kick sent him flying sideways like a bullet. While still airborne, Yugito appeared above him, swiping her hands down. He quickly tried to block her attack by folding his hands across his face. Her attack was more than that. Her extended nails cut through his skin, exposing his flesh on the wrists. They also cut through his chest toward his abdomen. The woman then kicked him to the ground. Naruto winced in pain as his back brutally crashed to the ground. He was buried deep, leaving a crater formed. For a moment, he didn't move, but was forced to lift his knees to block a lunging Yugito from crashing into him with both her legs. When she collided with his shin, he growled painfully as his body dug deep into the ground. The woman was just being merciless. While she was still above him, Naruto clapped his bleeding hands. Yugito shifted her eyes to the left side. A clone appeared beside her in midair. It was twisting, its right leg swiftly moved toward her temple. She saw the attack again and ducked under the swing before jumped away from the attack. The clone disappeared in a puff of smoke. Slowly, Naruto tried to get up, ignoring his aching body. Seeing Naruto get up, Yugito lunged at him with her Baiju's chakra starting to leak out. She landed in front of him. The second she did so, she saw his body shift backwards, trying to get away from her. But she stretched to her limits, lifting her right foot. But she didn't get anywhere as she was suddenly frozen from her legs. Naruto didn't need a second invitation. It was almost as if he saw this coming. A merciless punch gutted her. Yugito gritted her teeth, pain shooting through her spine. Her whole body trembled. When Naruto caught her on her throat and started strangling her, Yugito tried summoning her Baiju's chakra to transform. It was happening, and then Naruto slammed his fingers on her chest. The flow of chakra was cut off and he let her go. Yugito fell, crystal still on her left foot. She clutched her chest firmly. She felt it tightening as if there was something spreading through it. She looked up at Naruto and asked through gritted teeth. What did you do to me? I wish I could fight you, Yugito-san. But I cannot afford it. There are more Jinchuriki I must still face, Naruto said apologetically. The right method is to capture you or just kill you. But I cannot kill you. I don't want to. So, I'll just take you out of battle. What did you do to me? A Jinchuriki's biggest weapon is his Baiju's power. I'm Uzumaki, that isn't a problem for me. If I can get a hold of you, I can cut off that link, Naruto explained lightly. If I leave you here, someone could undo the seal. Doubt it. But anything can happen. Why does it hurt? A less painful method is to use your own seal. But I don't know its location. I would rather not undress you just for that purpose. I used a rather forceful method. He showed her his palm. There was the number 2 printed in black. The easiest off releasing yourself is to chop my hand off. He turned to Guren. You are too nice. She is an enemy, and must be killed, Guren said forcefully. Just lock her up. I'll have a clone take her to Konoha camps, Naruto said indifferently. Guren shook her head and did what Naruto wanted. After a moment, she watched a clone pick up the woman and then depart. Let's go back to the fire country, Naruto said, waving her to follow him. Sure. They found Neji waiting for them, surrounded by 10 dead shinobi. The Hyuga looked ruffled up a bit. The only person who didn't show signs of battle was Guren. Naruto had to get rid of his shirt since Yugito cut through it. You know she killed everyone in that thing, right? Neji said, staring at Naruto. What? She created the dome to imprison them. But then had everyone crystallized before snapping her fingers. They all shattered like glass. Neji explained. When Naruto turned to face her, Guren waved her hand. I didn't kill everyone. There are survivors. That's why I'm keeping that. But it won't hold for too long. Naruto just shook his head and did not turn to glance at the jutsu Guren had created. There were bigger worries than this woman's murderous intent. He had to move ahead. For war wasn't waiting for anyone to gather their thoughts. We are most likely going to go our separate ways since Kumo won't want to cross into the fire country, Naruto said to Guren. I hope you do behave. She has to go with you. Had enough of me already, Hyuga? Yes. Neji was quick to say. I'm probably going to focus on finding out where Iwa's Jinchuriki are. If we can remove them from the picture, it should make things less worrisome. Neji agreed. He could feel the worries of those fighting in Earth front lines. There was always the fear that a Baiju'u could appear and do what Naruto just did. It was fine when it was happening to the enemy. Neji shuddered at the thought that even Konoha's forces could face the same dread. No, they could be facing it now. What of Kumo's other Jinchuriki? That was one Naruto didn't want to fight if he was being honest. He had the experience and he held with 8 tails within him. Naruto didn't want to face up to that situation. It would be brutal. Forget that he had 2 Baiju'u within him. He didn't want to spend chakra unnecessarily. And fighting B could force that situation. Most likely moving with the Reikage. I heard that was the same thing even in the last war. They apparently combine into a deadly team. That isn't good news. Isn't the Reikage supposed to be the fastest man alive? Yup. We could do with the yellow flash right about now, Naruto said with a smile. No doubt, Iwa will start experiencing some post-war stress. And you accuse me of sadism. Naruto's eyes flashed toward Guren, but he didn't say anything to her. Tsunade looked at the reports, wondering if she should just go ahead and join the battle. Things were not looking good around the land of mushrooms. Anaki surely hadn't been just sitting around enjoying peace. He'd preparing for another war. Its tragedies aside, Konoha had been sitting pleasantly, enjoying peace, hoping it lasts forever. Not in this damn world. What had her sensei even been thinking when he relaxed things to this level? When the village lost the military power of the Uchiha, he should have done something. But he did nothing and she was feeling the pains of that hole. It needed to be plucked, but unfortunately, Iwa was filling it up with defeats. She got up from her chair and looked at the village streets through the window. Shikaku was in battle, having set up camp within the Fire Nation. But because of Danzo, she couldn't move out carelessly. The streets were peaceful nonetheless. You wouldn't think there was war. In this parts, it never came. The Leaf didn't even have a history of being invaded, bar that one incident with sand. Nobody has ever defeated it. They fought bloody wars while everyone here went about their normal lives. Some still lived in fear nonetheless. Someone could just spring out of nowhere and start killing them. Shizune, the god Im, said as her assistant walked into the office. She had recalled her from the medical camps because there was something they needed to do. Tsunade-sama? If I go into the battlefield, Sakura has to move out. You'll remain at the medical camps. But I've just received a warning from Danzo telling me we may be targeted. We have to move camp. Danzo warning you? He may be crazy, but he wants Konoha to win. My loss at this stage would be a huge loss to Konoha, and it would be a huge boost to both Kumo and Iwa. But the message didn't say what she had to worry about. What could it be? It would be surprising for Iwa to send assassins to take her out. In some battle, you take out the commander, you win the battle. But in this battle, even if she were to end up dying, Shikaku would still continue to lead. No doubt, Danzo would be scheming his way into the Hokage Tower while the war raged on. For now, he would just sit back in his little hole and make sure that Sasuke was ready for battle. A messenger appeared within the office, giving her a message. She read it and then frowned. Kakashi is looking for reinforcements, she said. How is it going with Neji? No report is coming about any Kumo movement into the Fire Nation. It didn't mean anything. She didn't think something would have happened to Naruto. She could be wrong. This was war. People died. Tsunade shook her head. She shouldn't make herself gloomy by thinking about such things. Naruto was fine. He was alive. And she would see him again. Suan walked back to her chair and put on a thoughtful look. We don't know what attacks will come. You'll have to move out separately from me. Kurotsuchi frowned hearing the news that Konoha had managed to sneak into Kusa and the capital. This was bad, and they couldn't move carelessly because of Konoha's aerial attacks. Those damn sneaky attacks. They had cost them. So many lost without even fighting against anyone. For Konoha to resort to such tactics just meant the village was really stretched. If they take Kusa, it will be bad for us. What should we do? If they take Kusa, it acts as a base. They can heal their wounded and get supplies. Our original goal was getting Kusa either way. If we can't get it, then neither can Konoha. But some of our men are fighting there, not in the capital. The man shifted uncomfortably hearing those words. There was just a hint of evil in them that just made one fear for the worst. Summon one of our Jinchuriki. Sasuke stared at Danzo, wondering why he was still being kept within this place when he could be fighting. After all, Naruto was already in battle. The blonde was surely running loose. He needed to be out there, fighting. For whatever reason, Sasuke just wanted to unload on someone because he was frustrated. Why am I still here? Because it is not yet time for you to be out there. What are you waiting for you? The right time. Konoha is a little backed, but it will pull through. We must not waste time in using this chance to get the best of Tsunade. No doubt, she was going to allow the cage to live. That Konoha was going to win the war was without question. Danzo was certain it was going to happen no matter what was happening as things stand. But it was what happened afterward that he worried him. To the victor the spoils of war go. In this regard, it was the Jinchuriki. Konoha was in a position to collect not just one more but two more Baijuu in this war, and it would make their position unmatched. They could go on to rule afterward. Of course, Tsunade wouldn't go that route. Not with Hiruzen's teaching. This was why he had to move things on his own. He would make sure things worked out for him in the end. Why does it sound as if you're plotting something? Sasuke asked with narrowed eyes. He wasn't blind to the fact that the man coveted the position of Hokage, and was actively trying to get it from Tsunade even when they appeared to be working together. The princess is too soft. She has taken many of Hiruzen's teachings to heart. When Konoha wins this war, both the Tsuchikage and Reikage must die. It makes things easier to manage when Konoha the enemies are dead, Danzo said. With Kumo, the Reikage's brother must also die, even when he is a Jinchuriki. He is too powerful to be left alive. You want me to move in without the Hokage's order and do this? Yes. Sasuke just shook his head. He was going back to train and wait for the order to come alive. He didn't necessarily care for Danzo's schemes. As long as he got out. He was nonetheless keeping a close eye. We must talk about your former friend. Naruto? Danzo nodded. Naruto had questionable motives since his return. He just couldn't come to trust the blonde. He wasn't the same kind-hearted child anymore. There was something inside his head that made him wary. You have to keep an eye on him after the war. I do not trust him. Sasuke found it amusing. Naruto not being trusted. He'd never thought he would live to see that day. It isn't my job to keep an eye on him. If you didn't trust him, do something about it. But only you can do something. I doubt he will turn against the leaf, but he is a flight risk. If he tries to leave Konoha, he has to be stopped and only you can do it. Sure, I'll stop him for you. Kakashi-sensei. Kakashi didn't need to be told why Sakura was calling him. He could see it with his own eyes while standing top of a building. Damiwagakur. He had been dragged in battles and now he had to face this thing. What was coming toward the capital was a Baiju Dama. A huge one at that. It was coming in fast. If that thing exploded in the capital, it was going to cause massive damage and kill innocent lives. It was too late to even call for civilians to try to evacuate. What was this strategy? If we can't get it, then you too can't get it? He'd been worried about when Iwa Jinchuriki would appear, but he didn't think in this way. This was worse than one appearing in the capital to attempt to wreak havoc. What are we going to do? Sakura was in a panicked tone. She was not ready to die. Not yet. She didn't have a family of her own and she had yet to surpass her master. I'm going to blast it with Kamui. Go down and be ready for anything. Kakashi ordered, lifting his headband. Hi. He'd been using the Sharingan a lot since the battle started. It was draining his chakra. He ignored the panicked cries before below. People were running about like headless chickens. They were afraid for their lives. He hoped nothing as bad as a stampede occurred in crowded spaces. It would have been better if they couldn't see the tailed beast bomb. Then the jutsu neared. Kakashi focused, his Mangekyo Sharingan activated. Kakashi focused large amounts of chakra to activate his jutsu. Kamui. His eye bled, and he fell to one knee, breathing heavily. He'd made it as big as he could. To avoid only taking in just parts of the jutsu. The ripple pattern appeared in front of the tailed beast bomb. Like a magic trick, the large swirling vortex warped away the jutsu before it could reach the capital. It was there and then it wasn't there anymore. But Kakashi was feeling the effects. He'd not made Kamui as big as that before. Any half-hearted job and it would have exploded before it could be fully warped away. While the panic died down, Kakashi looked up. Another one. This had to be some joke. If his Sharingan wasn't activated, he'd like to believe it was an illusion. If he used Kamui in the same manner, it was going to prove fatal for him. But if he doesn't, this whole place was going to burn. Those things had enough power to wipe out a mountain. A city of humans was nothing. But if he stopped it, and died, they would just launch another one. What will his death achieve? Chapter 12. Yugito stared at the clone of Naruto, thinking of a way to escape this trap she'd been put into. If she could escape, she would be able to send a message to Kumo. She would warn B that he had to be careful, that he watched out for Naruto touching him for too long or else it would be over. Given that he stopped her from transforming, she assumed that the seal couldn't be applied when one had already transformed into a full Baiju. If she had known, she wouldn't be a hostage. And so early in the war. The Raikage was going to consider this a failure. Truly a failure. She had put Kumo at a disadvantage already. In all her life, Yugito had never thought she would become a hostage. After so many years of torture and training. It had to end like this. Not even been given the opportunity to use the power that made her fearsome, a kunoichi Kumo was proud to have. Something on your mind? Yugito wondered if glaring was even worth it. Where are you really taking me? We are not heading towards the direction of the hidden leaf. I can simply say that I ran out of chakra and then you escaped. The clone said with a smile. Yugito became nervous. No matter what, that was just treasonous. What was he playing at? For her it was over. Konoha wasn't a cruel village but this was still war. If she had been captured by Iwa, without doubt, they would have already started making plans to extract the Baiju within. She would die as a result but with Kumo demanding her return, they would send her corpse to the Raikage Tower. Truly a sad end of her life. What are you suggesting? He shook his head. The life of a Jinchuriki was sad. And Yugito didn't have it easy either. But she seemed like a proud kunoichi who loved her village. He wasn't going to suggest anything bad to her. If I take you to Konoha, a man named Danzo is going to make sure you become a loyal weapon for Konoha. Kumo cannot complain. The spoils of war. Yugito smiled bitterly. If Kumo ends up on the losing side, it would indeed be the end. But if Kumo lost, she could be used as a bargaining chip. Tossed around like that. Her life was dependent on the whims of war. It would be much better for Kumo to win. She prayed that her village wins. Because if it didn't win, it was over for her. No, Even if Kumo won, and she was taken to Konoha, things would end up bad for her. Hence Naruto said he wasn't taking her to Konoha. What did you mean you could say I escaped? Nothing. Just a passing thought. I have those kinds of thoughts at times. Of course, I can't let you escape. Not now. You'll only rejoin the war and cause trouble for Konoha. Even if she accepted being freed with the promise of not fighting, she would still fight. She didn't have the power and to make a decision over her life. The Raikage was the one who dictated how she moved. A tool, truly. But it was the same for any shinobi. Just worse for a Jinchuriki. Then where are we going? I'm going to stash you somewhere secret. I'll come for you after the war. Stash? What am I? The clone laughed. A hostage that has forfeited its right to live and make any decisions. Right now, I can make any decision I want. I can undress you right now. Yugito tensed. He was not some kind of pervert, was he? He wasn't going to do anything to her? At this rate, she couldn't do anything to defend herself. Once more, the clone laughed. Don't be tense. Nothing like that will happen to you. It is just a highlight of what happens in this world. We shinobi worry about missions, and face the possibility of death in such missions. Have you seen what it's like for civilians? While traveling, they can get abducted. Sold as slaves. Sold for their organs to be harvested. And index finger pointed at her. You could even be sold in a market to be someone's wife. Is the point to any of this? Yes. A highlight to the dangers of the shinobi world. Your life is mine now. If I choose, you won't go back to Kumo. If I choose, you'll never see the light again. The clone paused. I'm a person tired of this world. You might not be. As long as you smile and do your duties, you are happy. Is there more I should demand? People without dreams. Modest. Fine. You will witness the ugliness of this world, and after all that, you'll make a choice. To live or to die. To help me or to become a spoil of war. It was there and now it wasn't there anymore. Pure chaos and destruction. There had been people running about the streets a minute ago, but now there was nothing. Debris. A large crater at the heart of the capital. Perhaps some survivors lying under the debris. Maybe not. The entire capital wasn't wiped out. But you wouldn't think there had been buildings there. Not where the crater sat, now filling up with water. Such was the power of Baijuo. Kakashi bitterly dug himself from the ground and sat down, staring at the debris. He'd buried himself to the ground when he saw the bomb explode. He could have done something. Useless maybe, but he wouldn't have to live with the fact that he made this kind of choice. To allow himself to live to fight another day. Had he made the right choice? Would Minato-sensei even look at him over what he had just done? Seeing the debris moving, Kakashi moved and tried to lift it. There was someone under it. He helped them. Bruises. Cuts. A broken leg. He'd survived without breaking anything. Sensei. This voice, it brought relief in Kakashi's voice. He turned around, watching Sakura rush toward him from the rubbles. She was bruised but alive. He closed his eyes. They couldn't just be the only ones who survived this. What had been the point of even coming here? This place would have been better suited if he didn't come. If Konoha had chosen to stay out of the way. Sensei. Sakura had a look of horror in her face. Without Katsuyu, she would have become ashes by now, blowing with the winds. Heal her, Kakashi said. Sakura knelt and then closed her eyes. A parent living while the child died. They had looked at them for protection. But in the end, they just brought this. Who was cruel enough to do something like this? Something so inhuman? Something so evil. Innocent people had lost their lives and she couldn't protect them. They couldn't protect them. They were killed in their presence. Sakura felt like there was something bit her throat. Was this what war was about? Did innocent people have to die like this? Was this the ugliness of war that her master had been talking about? Why would anyone order such an attack? She asked with disbelief. Kakashi looked around. It didn't look like there was another attack coming. He swallowed hard. Who would do this though? He couldn't even say he could have saved those lives. He couldn't admit to anything. He just had to live with this burden and try to continue fighting. The war was still continuing. I don't know, Sakura. I really don't know. For now, let us look for survivors. Someone must have seen the explosion. Yamato will be coming to join us and we need to get ready to move head into battle. It sounded cruel. Once Yamato arrives, there would be no time to do anything. They had to move into battle. Iwo would not wait for them to search for survivors. But Sensei, are we going to leave things as they are? If we don't go out and fight, this could happen to Konoha, To another town. We can't let them pass into the Fire Nation. We have to drive them back, Kakashi replied in a hardened tone. Kuza is still in trouble as well. Sakura swallowed. In her good conscience, she could not abandon the wounded to fight. She was a medic. Her first instinct was to heal someone, even when they are the enemy. How could she even sleep at night knowing that she abandoned someone who needed her help? Didn't this go against everything Kakashi taught them? Yamato saw the explosion and then became worried. This was bad. A Jinchuriki had finally appeared in the battlefield and it came with such a loud bang. He worried for the capital of mushrooms. It couldn't have been able to survive that explosion, then what of Kakashi and the me he'd gone in with? Were they still alive? Was Iwa even moving toward the capital? Or just trying to get them out of the way? This was war all right. Yamato-sensei, Shikamaru called he walked toward the Mukuten user. He had a bad feeling about this. That explosion was massive. The only thing that could have caused such an explosion had to be the power of a Baijuu. He hadn't seen anything like it, but if that was what they had to go against, it didn't look good. And now he could understand why shinobi villages valued the power of Baijuu. Can we assume that Jinchuriki have now come to the battlefield? Yamato nodded. But I cannot understand why they would attack the capital like that. There is no benefit. Unless many of Konoha's shinobi were there. Shikamaru adopted a thoughtful look. What was the purpose? Did they even have to worry about that? They had a Jinchuriki to compete with. Because he couldn't find a way to counter that kind of power, Shikamaru considered about why Iwa would destroy the mushroom's capital in the manner they did. It didn't give him the peace of mind. After all, the answers he came up with were just dreadful. Most likely to avoid Konoha gaining a stronghold and being boxed into the Earth Country. Kumo is coming on the other side, and we are here. Suna is also camped across his borders. If Suna moves, Iwa gets pushed back. He paused. They could have just thought if we can't make it ours, then Konoha can't make it its own. Also acts as a deterrent. We do not know Iwa's Jinchuriki. We cannot even move carelessly. What of Naruto? Received a message last night he was moving towards this side. But I don't know his exact location. Yamato shook his head. I'm going to send scouts to check the area. We can't just move in without knowing what is happening there. And if Kakashi was injured, then they would be acting against time. He had no choice nonetheless. He had to act with caution. Mabui heard the message she'd received loud and clear. I hadn't been willing to head into battle yet, but the news that Yugito was gone meant that they had to do something and quick. Even she hadn't expected that they would lose so many in just one go, and especially Yugito. She looked at the Reikage. Calm, not as always. He was no doubt going to charge ahead now. But perhaps it was necessary. The strategy had to change now. Reikage-sama. What, Mabui? We've lost contact with both Samui and see there is information coming that Yugito may have been captured. What? I looked shocked. Yugito captured. Was it Konoha or Iwa? No, it had to be Konoha. Who? Scouts report that it was Konoha's Jinchuriki moving along the borders, Mabui reported. Should we send people to look for her? Of course. Even if they have to go deep into enemy territory. Yugito must be retrieved. I frowned. But to think one of his Jinchuriki would be captured so early like that. He still had B. But his brother was going to move with him. Konoha isn't going to try to move to our side. It was only interested in stopping us from going through the Fire Nation. Forget that assault. We march straight toward where the main battle is. Iwa and Konoha have already engaged. Shouldn't we leave a small force to be able to go behind Konoha? If they see us marching toward the earth, they'll focus on their front lines. We can sneak into their rear. It can also cut off supplies coming from their village, Mabui suggested. Fine. We won't be quick to engage. Let Konoha and Iwa battle for a little longer. Kyuchi stared ahead, hundreds of Konoha shinobi. They hadn't engaged yet, not crossing swords. But jutsu had been thrown while they defended. Nobody really wanted to take the first step in charging ahead. So they were all trying to reduce the numbers of the others before making such a move. Both forces were conscious of this. If they made a move to charge, it would all just be about killing each other until the other gave up and retreated, or there was no more enemy standing. This was what war brought to the battlefield. He too didn't want to take the first step. They were almost equal in numbers. Whoever had the best trained shinobi would edge out. But there would be a cost. Incoming. Hundreds of kunai were flying toward them. No doubt, carrying explosive tags. This had been coming. With numbers so close to each other, it was always difficult to navigate. If they had wind users, they would just end up deflecting them. Scatter, Kyuchi shouted. There was no panic as the men made some distance between them. Just enough that they would be able to execute jutsu without getting in the other's way. Executive defensive jutsu, he shouted once more. First line, Golem. A resounding hi followed shortly. The first step was to create 5 earth golems in front of them. The jutsu was created in combination of different shinobi. They stepped in front and took some of the tags. Many more still managed to pass above, heading toward them. Boom. The tags that hit the golems exploded. It didn't take time for the golems to crumble down into dust. A combination of mud walls and some mud domes were used by the men to hide. The tags rained on them. One after the other they exploded. Kyuchi closed his eyes for a moment as he heard some of his men crying. Shields faltering under the firepower. A minute past the explosions stopped. Incoming. When he heard the cry, Kyuchi jumped from the mud wall he'd created and stood above it. Konoha were moving. They were charging while his men were disoriented from the explosions. He glanced back to look at the chaos from behind. There was no time to be sorry or even think of retreating to deal with the wounded. The war had to continue. Earth displacement, he shouted while jumping down. He knew they would get it. 2 shinobi jumped in line with him, forming a strong shield. But that was not the purpose. They were doing hand seals. They all simultaneously shouted out their jutsu while slamming their hands to the ground. 4 massive displacement occurred within the Konoha shinobi ranks. They were charging ahead and then the 4 areas just started sinking. It was so quick, many sunk within the holes created while many jumped away to safety. The others just continued with their charge as if nothing had happened. Close them. Kyuchi ordered. This was to crush those caught within the jutsu. Engage. And then the battle started in earnest. Only the winner would walk out alive. They were already deep within the Fire Nation and close to the Konoha HQ camp where Shikaku was located. But as they traveled, a messenger stopped them and then spoke to Neji before going away. Orders? Neji looked grim as he turned around. Iwa struck first, he said. That could only mean their Jinchuriki had appeared in battle. They had to move quickly. But Neji's tone just suggested the worst had happened. Where? Capital in mushrooms. It was destroyed. Their Jinchuriki has attacked. And Konoha forces who haven't engaged have been ordered to avoid battle until the Jinchuriki have been located, Neji said. Naruto closed his eyes, shaking his head slightly. The power of Baijuu being used in such a manner. Just for purely destruction. Iwagakure did not deserve to have a Jinchuriki. If they used it in such a manner, then both their weapons needed to be removed from their hands. There would be no cry about trying to maintain the balance of power. That worked long ago anyway. In today's age, it has become irrelevant. Innocent people must have lost their lives. Was it all that was to war? Just pure chaos and destruction. Death and suffering. Yet shinobi nations did not blink before turning to war. Pain and suffering did not deter these people from going to war. It was almost as if they's already accepted that war was part of their lives. They lived by killing. Needless bloodshed. And now, Konoha was frozen. He faced Neji and then asked. What have we been ordered to do? Guren and I will continue to the path of Taki to join others. You are to move head to mushrooms. But there is something you must do first, Neji said. There is a small force of Iwa shinobi that managed to get into the Fire Nation. They are apparently heading toward the HQ. Stop them. Naruto nodded. The Fire Nation was large. They couldn't cover all lines. But still, this was going to be a busy time for him. He created 2 clones. I'll leave these clones watching the border on this side. They'll alert us if Kumo decides to sneak in from behind. That is fine. Still, war is a brutal thing, isn't it? Naruto asked. What do you expect? Guren asked, hands folded across her chest. Shinobi are always fighting. We kill each other during missions. But this kind of battle brings the worst in people. You kill whoever you want. You reveal the inner parts of you that you would normally keep hidden. I think that is just people like you who are sadists. There are some of us who would rather not kill when it is not necessary. Naive, Guren exclaimed. If you leave them alive, you only give them an opportunity to launch an attack while you look away. People will beg you to spare them, and when you do, they will stab you in the back while laughing at how easy it was. That was quite true. Naruto had seen it many times. You just could not trust shinobi. But that's how things were in this world. To kill and kill until there was no one standing. Couldn't people just learn to live? Couldn't shinobi learn to accept defeat and just go home instead of crawling to kill the enemy even when your life has been spared? If people like Guren commanded war, it would be hell. It was nonetheless obvious was that what happened in Mushrooms shouldn't have happened. It wasn't like this didn't happen outside of war. It occurred, it was just that there was no consequence for such an action. Great nations minded their own business and would not do anything because it was right but rather, because they thought they could benefit something from it. Not everyone is like that, Neji said firmly. But in this time, to spare someone like that would be a mistake. We are at war. Why does every action have to be condoned by saying we are at war? You are just too kind, Guren said with a stare. But sometimes you don't look kind. Naruto smiled. Overlapping emotions, I guess, he said casually. Either way, we have orders to follow. I hope you'll behave, Guren. We don't want you going loose. Neji will have a heart problem while trying to control you. He just needs to learn that he can't control me. I don't even know why I'm going with you, Neji said with a shake of his head. I'll still have a report to compile. Just know that when you don't follow orders, it doesn't reflect good on you. Guren narrowed her eyes dangerously. You're going to report me to the Hokage? Of course, Neji replied as if it was the obvious thing to do. You cannot be trusted to follow orders. In missions where we have to play as a team, you're likely to either put others or the mission in danger with your behavior. I'm not stupid enough to put a mission in danger. But brave enough to ignore orders. You two should just date and be done with it, Naruto said, getting ready to depart. Be safe. And we will meet after this. You're going to face danger. Neji reminded him. Naruto just smiled. Sometimes, it is the easiest challenge that kills you, he said, jumping down and fled from the scene. While running through the ground, Naruto wondered which of the Baijuwu he should talk to. The Kyuubi or Isabu? Perhaps Isabu would be better. Then again, with how things were going, he would need to have much better cooperation with the strongest Baijuwu. Isabu. Naruto. What do you say about having more friends in with you? At this rate, I will end up having to take both Iwa's Jinchuriki. Depending on how things go on the other hand, I will also take Kumo's Jinchuriki. Better the power with him. Perhaps, he was starting to think as if he were God and that he alone should have power. There might be some truth in that. But Naruto wanted that power. Regardless of what anyone thought, without power you could not change anything in the shinobi world. Besides, it was best to keep the powers of the Baijuwu away from humans. Eventually he would have to release them. To his death. He didn't expect to live a long life anyway. He just needed to live long enough to bring about a change, and perhaps Jinchuriki would have better lives. I don't have a problem with it, but I'm not sure your other friend will be happy about it. Why are you bringing me into this? Doesn't matter, Naruto said with a smile. He lives rent-free within me. He can afford to squat with others. It won't be for that long anyway. And I thought you were becoming worse than all other humans by growing to love our powers. The Kyuubi said. Don't be like that. You know me better. But I think I've said I'm like other humans. It is true that I will use the power within me. But to me, you're not just a weapon. I think a Jinchuriki is better placed to understand that a Baijuwu is more than just a mass of chakra. I see you every day. I hear you talk. I know your emotions. Your hatred. Your pride is the nine tails. That is just like any human. We love. We hate. We take pride in our powers. Don't compare me to humans. For you act like one. Isabu intervened, speaking in an amused tone. Your long-time host is something else, he said to the Kyuubi. I've never had anyone claim that a Baijuwu acted in a similar way to that of a human. Because this one is not right in his head. Naruto laughed at this. I thought you and I were getting along just fine, he said. It is fine nevertheless. But how come you're more relaxed, unlike the drama queen, Nine Tails? You've also has the same fate with humans, but his hatred is something else. Could it be that he is just highly emotional? Isabu laughed at this. Then again, when the sage was saying his goodbyes, Kurama had the biggest tears. Well, we will see what happens in the coming hours or days. When Naruto landed on a tree branch, a kunai hit it. His eyes glanced down as he came to a halt. The kunai was embedded with an explosive tag. He quickly tried to jump away from the tree, but the tag exploded before he could make any distance. He was caught slightly but still managed to get away without his legs being burnt. The second he landed on the ground, earth walls protruded from the ground in both his sides. Naruto glanced ahead, seeing that he was surrounded. They must have had a sensor and had known he was coming. These were not just normal shinobi if they had managed to hide and plot such attacks. They probably never had any intention of going after their command center, but just wanted to keep him busy. just to keep him away from battle while their Jinchuriki ran rampant against Konoha shinobi. A problematic situation. His eyes narrowed at the closing walls. He could simply crush them using Sage Mode. But that was not a power to be wasted like that, but seeing as he had no other option, Naruto held out both hands, touching the walls. For a moment, he stopped them from crushing him, but this left him defenseless. A lack of experience. He cursed his luck seeing a volley of kunai rain toward him. No doubt, with explosive tags. Isabu, let's try your scales. Got it. Naruto stopped trying to block the walls and just folded his hands together. The walls slammed into him on both sides, before the tags rained on the walls. There were many of them. And when they were set off, a powerful blast rocked through the area. Crimson flames burst into the sky like a column, burning away the trees that surrounded. They continued to burn for over a minute before slowing down. You think we got him? He is a Jinchuriki. That isn't going to be enough to bring him down. Ready for the last attack. When the flames died down, a large crater was chucked out by the explosion. Naruto was still standing within it, hands folded across his chest. Not even a scratch. How? Ready for the next attack. The leader shouted, ignoring the shock the others were experiencing. Even he hadn't thought Naruto would actually survive that without even a scratch. That explosion was massive. Not even that Tsuchikage could have taken it and survived. Deception. He motioned as three masked men jumped toward the blonde from the shadows. Uzumaki Naruto, one of the masked men said. You will be buried here. We were looking for you but we didn't think you'd just come to us. Naruto narrowed his eyes dangerously. There was a literal sense to what the man was saying. Iwagakure had skilled earth-style users. They perfected those kind of jutsu as it was their natural affinity. I walked into a trap then. Undesirable since Iwa is already on the attack. Let us deal with this quickly, Naruto said in a serious tone. The three lunged toward him in a blur. Yet, Naruto could see their movements. He had seen faster shinobi. After all, he had even seen Orochimaru and even Sasuke. They were better shinobi. And so, he didn't permit them to reach him, but blurred out of their sight. Behind. One of the masked man who had stayed hidden shouted. It didn't matter to Naruto as he targeted the man in the middle. He was above the air, just behind the three when his right leg swept through the air in a blur, heading toward the back of the head of his target. Hearing the shout, the man tried to turn around, but he was welcomed by Naruto's right foot, which slammed into his forehead. A sickening crunch as the kick connected. The man was sent bulleting away. The other two reacted swiftly. They twisted around, lunging as both tried to kick him around his shoulders. Their kick seemingly hit him but he exploded into a log, which quickly burst as the two attacks hit it. Naruto landed behind the shinobi while holding a kunai. While driving it toward the back of one of the masked man, still slightly above the ground, he felt a shift of the ground and glanced below. Two hands burst out from the ground but Naruto quickly jumped up, avoiding the attack. But this forced him to stop his attack and it gave an opportunity for the man he'd been trying to stab to twist around. The man planted his foot on his chest. Naruto didn't wince when the kick slammed into his chest. It was weak. Not enough to leave him gasping for air. He had received much worse. The other flashed above him, and tried to hit him with a drop kick. Naruto folded his hands above, blocking the kick. This forced him to hit the ground. The second he did, he knew something was wrong. This became evident when he was suddenly dragged down. It was the very ground he stood on that was submerging deep within the earth. When the shinobi above him tried to flee, Naruto caught him by his foot, dragged him down and then slammed him to the ground. He then stepped on his throat, kept his eyes up. Within a couple of seconds, he was standing deep within a dark pit. It was so deep, he could only see the light far away from him. This is the end for you. The shinobi Naruto was stepping on managed to sneak out a couple of words while grabbing onto his right leg. This P-lace is going to be reinforced with iron to keep you grounded. He then exploded into a liquid substance. Naruto realized, he was glued. Well, he could give this effort an A. It was executed well. And if he was anyone else, he would be sweating bullets knowing this was the end for him. He was learning. In war, you targeted the strongest to try to remove them from battle. After all, the strongest usually moved alone to go to different battlefields. It was the same as with the Sannin during the Second Shinobi War. Or his father during the Third War. And now it was his turn. Meanwhile, an iron boulder, slapped with explosive tags was being pushed into the hole, closing the gap. When it slammed down, there was an earth-shaking explosion. But the ground remained closed. You think that's it? It had to be, they no longer had any plays left aside from fleeing. Naruto wondered if heading ahead was going to be alright. That had been dangerous. The idea behind it at least. If Iwa could plot this for a Jinchuriki, surely they could plot such devilish tactics for other shinobi they dedicate as too dangerous for them. But in such a situation, what could he do aside for alerting Shikaku and the Hokage that such could possibly happen? In that way, they could take caution in their actions. He had to head to the capital of the mushrooms for now. But he could still send a message. That was quite a show. Shin. Naruto glanced at the man hidden in the shade of a tree through the corner of his eyes. When did you get here? Just at the end. If you're here, how goes the business with the feudal lords? Challenges in the wind capital and earth. The earth was especially troublesome. The others were fine. We had to strong-arm things in the fire though. The other people appeared to wield too much power and influence over the daimyo. But things are in motion. If you were plotting to change things with the feudal lords, you had to do it during such a time. In any other time, when there was resistance and violence was to be used, it could lead to other wars. But in such a war, daimyo were useless. Only after when villages have burnt through the funds that they needed the feudal lords' coffers to bail them out would they start valuing the political heads of their countries. With the cage focused on war, we will speed through things. It nonetheless will take time for us to get it in order, Naruto said in a thoughtful tone. But perhaps we can use war to our advantage. Though, things aren't going as I'd hoped. You're a little subdued? Indeed, Naruto nodded. One can't be greedy nonetheless. We must make do with what we have. We don't want to end up falling into a trap and starting demanding for more and more. Naruto stood up. Approach the Mizukage. Openly? Yes. Remind her I'm the same person who returned Kiri's Jinchuriki to her. Even if it was on orders of Konoha. Her views are rather interesting. I'm just not certain if they are as naive as those of Jiraiya-sensei. I'm afraid I may not be able to return soon given Kiri's location and current situation. It is acceptable. Kakashi weakly smiled, seeing Yamato's company arrive. Guy was supposed to have been with them, but maybe he was sent away to another field. A day already in this place. He'd thought they would take some time before coming here. After all, scouts needed to do their jobs before they could move in. There was no telling if Iwa would move in and ambush them. Senpai. Yamato smiled. I thought for a moment you were gone when I saw that explosion. Kakashi really didn't have reasons to smile. Or be happy. Sure, he was alive. But he'd allowed the explosion to take place. He could have stopped it. Even at the cost of his life. But that would have been pointless. Kakashi knew this much and yet he still felt weighed down by the fact that he allowed people to die. It is hardly the situation to be smiling, Kakashi replied and then glanced at Shikamaru who had a thoughtful look on his face. Sorry, senpai, Yamato turned around. Seeing the destruction that had been caused by the explosion. Worse, people were no doubt dead. They had waited a day before moving to this place. You could never be too sure about anything. How did you even manage to survive such a blast? Luck, Kakashi said lamely. How is the situation? They are not moving and the Jinchuriki has disappeared from the battle. But it does seem like they are trying to attack us in 3 different directions. And Kuza? It is defending the borders. Guy has gone there to offer a helping hand as they are threatening to be overrun. Kakashi frowned at this. They were already stretched. That wasn't going to work out. What of Kumagakure? It was Shikamaru who replied. Approaching slowly. I heard that they lost one of their Jinchuriki. My guess is that they are waiting for us to reduce each other and then jump in. A conservative strategy from Kumagakure. I didn't think the Raikage would go for such a strategy, Kakashi said in a thoughtful tone. He already knew that Naruto had already defeated one of their Jinchuriki. But what bothered him was their slow movements. They had already lost some men but the bulk of their shinobi had yet to engage. They needed to make things move. They needed to make Kumo enter battle by force. Otherwise, both Konoha and Iwagakure would be at the mercy of the cloud. At least, they still had Suna waiting in the wings for support and there was still Kiri which had also promised to aid them. We need to make Kumo engage with Iwa immediately. Shikamaru nodded in agreement. Given their losses in the fire border, they appear to be trying to move toward the earth but avoiding the land of fire. Their fight is with Iwagakure, Yamato said. What do you think we should do? Where is Sai? He has gone to look for more explosive tags for the next phase. I suppose we are going to attack Kumo in the front lines now. Kakashi nodded. We avoid losing men by sending them to attack Kumo. If we do that aerial attack again, but on the cloud, they will be forced to move. He paused. And since we know where they are going, we can plan for it, for both Kumo and Stone. Shikamaru smiled. I see where you are going, sensei. If we have Sai plant the tags on the ground before he attacks, we also lead them to those traps. If we send many, they are likely to be discovered by scouts. But Sai is just one and can move in stealthily to avoid being spotted, Kakashi replied. But we would need to attack on the rear. If we attack in the front, they might be hesitant. When is Sai supposed to arrive? Tonight or tomorrow morning. The good thing was that Kumo was moving slowly. Kakashi didn't think there was a problem with plotting the attack then. But he just hoped that Iwa didn't spring a surprise attack on them. Because if it happened, it was just going to be dangerous for them. And Sai might not be able to carry out the special mission he had to carry out. And Naruto? Nothing as yet. But I heard he was coming to this side, Yamato replied. Kakashi nodded. Hope he arrives soon. Knowing that we are defenseless, Iwa might attack again. We need Naruto, he said. He could use Kamui to blow 2 more or 3 Baijuu bombs by now. He had recovered his chakra without battling. The only person who was expending chakra was Sakura, who has been healing people. Try to help out with this mess, for now, while resting up. Tomorrow we might end up going into battle. Or a Jinchuriki could appear now. Don't say it like that, senpai, Yamato said wearily. You're going to make some people restless. But it is the truth, Shikamaru agreed with the Jonin. This was war. Far cruel than what he had imagined. Shikamaru had made plans to succeed in missions. But now he was making plans to kill other people. It was either they allowed themselves to be killed or kill their enemies. We cannot afford to be absent-minded about the threat that is present. The Nara said. And the civilians still alive? We can't afford to move them to Kuza. It makes them easy targets. We can only move them back into the fire territory where there are no enemy shinobi. Kakashi replied with a slight shake of his head. I have made arrangements for their evacuation. Jiraiya waved his right hand, seeing Naruto. The blonde looked normal. Then again, since returning from Konoha, Naruto has always been different. No doubt, war wasn't going to turn him into a different person. He was hardened. But perhaps this was also a new experience could influence some of his thinking. After all, nobody could truly prepare for war. I thought you were going to be very busy in battle, Naruto spoke, walking toward the Sannin who was settled under a tree. I'm still not at best, but I've engaged in one battle, Jiraiya said, looking up into the sky through the parted leaves. Night was upon them. Naruto stopped beside the Sannin and then settled beside him. A messenger toad had informed him that the Sannin wanted to speak to him. Rest, he could do with it. He was sure, from tomorrow, it would be battle after battle. He wasn't even going to properly sleep tonight. He was going to part with Jiraiya and head toward his destination before stopping midway for rest. War is truly unpleasant. It is kill. 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 Naruto shook his head. And I'm heading toward the heart of it tomorrow. It never was pleasant. Pain and hatred are about its effect. Even if you win, you lose something. But great nations never seem to learn anything. They continue to charge toward war without second thoughts. Jiraiya wondered, was peace really possible in such a world? He really did believe, and yet some days, he asked himself. For he couldn't even bring about an answer to the question he has been asking for a long time. Even his students have backed away from his ideals. Following a different path to life. That is why people are always thinking about peace, Naruto thought out loud. But by nature, humans will always be in conflict. They will always lust over something. If we can love, we can hate. If we can desire, we can take. There was silence as both delved into their thoughts. Naruto broke the silence after a while. What was important that you had to call for me? Iwa has shinobi within the land of canyons. Most of Konoha's forces are concentrated between that border and the fire. If they move, those forces will be overrun. The situation in Mushrooms is fine, even if Iwa went crazy for a moment. Jiraiya shook his head at this. After reaching Mushroom's capital, I want you to tell them you need to move first. Those numbers are too many for Konoha in the canyons. The attack has to be from the rear. You want me to launch a crazy attack from the rear? Yes. I have sent a message to Shikaku about this, Jiraiya replied in a flat tone. So I must go and massacre people, Naruto said. How do I get in behind them? You can levitate, can't you? Only on my original body and when using Senjutsu. Clones apparently can't handle the pressure. Surprising, since I don't feel any pressure, Naruto replied casually. Fine, it will be done. In past wars, it was the Sannin. In the third, it was Minato. In war, you really couldn't show any mercy. Kindness only got you killed. The purpose wasn't really to make your enemies surrender but to kill them. How are you dealing with this? Jiraiya had already received report of Naruto's actions with Kumo Shinobi. A bit difficult but so far so good. I suppose I haven't seen anything yet. Yeah, Jiraiya nodded. Things are just going to get worse. At least nobody is making moves in Ame. Even though it was the usual fighting ground when Iwa and Konoha fought. It would have just caused more problems. I can imagine. I did defeat 2 members of the Akatsuki, Naruto said. But then, there are still others and you never know what happens next. I should go and visit Amiga Corps after the war. You want to die? Naruto shook his head. Just to talk. I do want to hear what turned your former student into what he has become. Experiences change people, sensei. But not enough that you want to kill your master. I saved those brats and gave them the tools to protect themselves. Are you angry? Jiraiya shook his head and then smiled sadly. I just feel like I have failed. I'm sad that one of my students turned out that way. But at least now I understand how the old man felt with Orochimaru. Well, we will see after. Naruto stood up. Stay safe, sensei. Oh, before I leave, the shinobi who were heading toward the command camp were not. But rather an ambush party. From what I gathered, Iwa has teams targeting Konoha's most powerful who are moving in small groups. They gave me quite a fright. That's a problem. Indeed. Their plans are coordinated and they are very effective. Just not against me. But against someone else, even you, they could work. I will alert Tsunade and Shikaku. Jiraiya turned to Naruto. Don't fall Naruto and don't die. At some level, we are all fragile and can die at any time. You need to survive this war. Even though what will be asked of you will be bloody and too much, I still want you to survive. It is war. Others are using their powers. Mine has to be used. It isn't about morals or anything but our own survival. If we lose, they are not going to let me live. They will extract the Baijuu within me and I'll see my end as a result. I would die first before that happens. Naruto just smiled and left the Sannin. These days, there was hardly sleep. Sakura was honestly missing her bed. The safety of the hidden leaf, home. In this wilderness, there was no security. Shinobi could just appear out of nowhere and start attacking. A Baijuu could just launch a devastating attack on them. It made her feel like they were living on borrowed them. Yet, she wanted to survive this war. Not to tell the stories about the horror she has had to witness. Nor her failure at the very thing she was trained to do, to save lives. But just so she could achieve dreams. Who wanted to die here? Sakura stared at the destruction, wondering if such a thing could happen to Konoha. If it did, their loved ones would be lost. Her parents. The village. But what of Sasuke? It would have really made her happy if he was here, fighting with them, for Konoha. Someone looks lost in thought. Sakura nearly jumped into the large crater when she heard the voice from behind. She twisted around and then beamed seeing Naruto. She nearly lunged at him, seeing his friendly face. A flash of memories. Happiness. Despite everything, in their team, Naruto had always been dependable. Naruto, Sakura exclaimed. You're here. Finally, Naruto said, then smiled, holding out his hands. Come on, you know you want to. Sakura knew she was being teased. She folded her hands across her chest. She wanted to do it. Really? But for some reason, she became embarrassed and remained rooted. Naruto noticed and then laughed. I wish there was time to chat about, but, he turned away from her. I must speak with others for I head into battle again. Sakura followed after him. Jinchuriki? Naruto glanced at her through the corner of his eyes. With the destruction that occurred here, it was understandable that she would be worried. But for Naruto, a Jinchuriki wasn't that of a problem. He knew Fuinjutsu, he could get them even after transforming. Because they were Jinchuriki, the chakra could be repressed. Not particularly, Naruto said with a wave of his hand. Dealing with Jinchuriki isn't that difficult. Because you're one? Sakura said as if it should be obvious. Naruto laughed at this. Because I am Uzumaki. Even an Uchiha who is powerful in Genjutsu can make it easy by manipulating the Baijuu and the Jinchuriki. Can something like that be done? Sakura asked with surprise. But also a bit afraid that something like that could happen to Naruto. Ah yes. You just need to have a really powerful Sharingan. Naruto stopped, putting a hand on Sakura's shoulder. But that can't happen to me. Like I said, I am Uzumaki. He turned away once more. Stay safe, Sakura. Naruto found Kakashi sitting with both Shikamaru and Yamato at the top of one of the buildings that still remained. He knew today was going to be a busy day. For him as well. They had some reprieve yesterday. But not him. Yesterday had been another battle. You took your time getting here, Shikamaru said in a tired tone. Had a bit of trouble on my way. Had Iwa waiting for me. Pulled off a bloody stunt that would have left me buried deep into the earth, Naruto said in a casual tone. Kakashi raised an eyebrow. Naruto's casual tone and his words didn't quite match. Was it bad? Naruto adopted a thoughtful look. A worthy effort but just not quite enough, the blonde replied before settling with the three. I'm not going to sit around too much. What do you need of me? Another mission? I thought you were going to stay around to help us locate Iwa's Jinchuriki. If we can eliminate them, we deal a blow to Iwa's forces, Yamato said. That will be done, Naruto said. I'm told you might need me for Kumo. Ah yes. You will negotiate that with Sai. Naruto nodded and then stood up. There is going to be some fireworks. It should force the Jinchuriki to come out. Fireworks? Pure destruction. Naruto gave a flat smile. Just death and destruction. Chapter 13. Sai already knew that Naruto wasn't all about the Baijuu sealed within him. On his own, the blonde was still a powerful shinobi. But he had just witnessed the blonde lay siege behind Iwagakure shinobi. In a flash, over 1,000 men were gone. And he hadn't been using the Kyuubi's power. Even after burning an alarming amount of chakra that Sai didn't even have, he was still rushing toward another scene. A second battle since the war began. The blonde was capable of floating but he didn't travel in speed and he'd said he needed to gather some chakra as they traveled toward canyons. Are you sure you're going to be fine? Sai had asked. He was surprised with himself. It wasn't so much that he was concerned about Naruto, but that they were going deep into enemy territory. There were no allies. If Naruto fell, it would be over for both of them. Are you asking if I can pull this off? Yes. I wouldn't have boarded here if I didn't think I could do it. I know I can. It is just going to require a ridiculous amount of chakra, Naruto replied with his eyes closed. He was sitting on the back of Sai's ink bird. He didn't mind the speed with which they traveled. He was concerned about gathering enough natural energy. Sai nodded and looked over to the area. They had flown past Takigakure. Is this safe enough? Can we see Kumo shinobi? From here yes. But if we can't get close enough, they'll just surround us. Naruto shook his head. They are not going to surround us with what I'm going to do. You should be close to me. Don't stay far, you might just get killed. The blonde stood up, glanced at the direction of where thousands of Kumo shinobi were slowly moving. He then jumped from the ink bird while holding his hands together. Chakra bubbled out of his body as he descended to the ground. By the time he landed, he was giant nine-tailed beast of orange chakra. He didn't stand on all fours but just on two like a human. He did a cage bunshine, creating two more Baijuu to stand beside him. He held up his hands. Kyuubi, Isabu, give me as much chakra as you can. What are you trying to create? Perhaps the most destructive jutsu I will ever make. Naruto replied. If I just use wind and sage jutsu only, it will drain me. I can't afford to be drained of my chakra at this moment. Covered within the chakra, Sai could only watch as Naruto seemed to form a Baijuu Dama. But when the clones starting to pool in chakra, the jutsu started to change form. Blades formed and the screeching sound took over. It kept increasing until it was almost bigger than the side of the Kyuubi. From the clouds, it seemed like a massive tornado was about to touch down. What was frightening wasn't its monstrosity size, but the amount of chakra condensed at the center of the jutsu. The atmosphere changed within the area, violent winds started picking as the jutsu screeched into the heavens, pulling in clouds and then twisting them around above it. By then, Sai knew why Naruto said he would die if he didn't stick around him. The power was forcing everything beside Naruto into a twisting motion. It looked like a natural disaster in the form of a tornado was about to strike. Daru stood wide-eyed staring at the violent storm forming in the distance. The jutsu that screeched from this distance left him feeling nervous. No, that was an understatement, he experienced dread. What was going to happen to that amount of power? He had seen Bi do some amazing things but nothing quite like that. This was true horror. If there had been some illusion that this was going to less unsettling, that jutsu crushed those dreams. If that got hurled toward them, they wouldn't be able to do anything. It was going to destroy everything that it touched. From the trees to the grass. The men with him would just be easy targets. His fears already saw the after images of the untold destruction. He glanced around. Battle-hardened shinobi were shaking. Most of them hadn't even seen a tailed beast bomb. This would naturally shock them to their core. Did this mean the end of their journey? What kind of war was this? That was the kind of jutsu that could destroy an entire village. Nervously, he turned around to face the Raikage. The Raikage jumped into the tree along with B. "Can you stop that, B?" I asked in a stern tone. That was quite dangerous. He didn't think anyone in Iwa or Konoha would have something like that. Then again, in a war with Jinchuriki, such things were bound to happen. "No." B replied with a shake of his head. "It's spinning too quickly and that has the power of two Baijuas. If I threw another tailed beast bomb, it is just going to make things worse." "What do you mean there are two Baijuas?" "The other is the Kyubi and the Sanbi." B replied. "He isn't going to throw it, is he?" His word, and they all watched. A second felt like an hour. When it happened, I panicked. The jutsu was hurled toward them. It came in too fast. He didn't expect that something like that would be hurled. And in that speed. "Scatter," he shouted, his lightning cloak burst into life and he grabbed both Daru and B, fleeing the scene. As he fled, the jutsu was chopping down the everything that stood in its way. Had there been a mountain, it would have just cleaned through it. He gritted his teeth in anger. His thousands men were not going to move quick enough. The jutsu was coming toward them in speed. Shizune was hopping through trees along with a squad of Onbu. She was in a transformation of Tsunade. The Godime had already departed toward Shikaku secretly. They were merely acting on the information Jiraiya gave them through Naruto. One of the Onbu suddenly held up his right hand, causing everyone to halt. It seemed there was some truth in the information. The Capitan said as the group dropped to the ground, forming a formation around the disguised Shizune. "A smart move on behalf of the Tsuchikage." The other said. "But it seems we have drawn the bad one." There was no panic even when it became apparent that their opponent was a Jinchuriki. Shizune became afraid. This was a Jinchuriki. A power that no one in this team was equipped to deal with. But who would have thought Iwa would send a Jinchuriki after Tsunade? Weren't they supposed to be keeping Konoha busy? With Naruto already at the battlefront, you'd think they wouldn't risk their advantage by playing such devilish tactics. 3. The captain called. "Flee with Shizune-san. We will keep him busy." "I'm afraid I cannot let you do that," the enemy announced. The second Naruto hurled the jutsu, the transformation became undone. He dropped to the ground on his knees, breathing slightly heavily. Sai didn't waste time creating another large bird. Both he and Naruto leapt onto it and then it took to the clouds. If such power existed, would other nations ever be at peace? Sai didn't think his master would allow someone with this kind of power to exist as an enemy. Even if he was friendly, only a firm control over him would make his lord comfortable. Naruto was dangerous. Sai believed this much. And to think he'd tried to fight this person to test his power. Naruto clapped his hands, drawing Sai's attention. Ridiculously, the jutsu expanded before blowing up. Boom! The violent, earth-shaking explosion rose high into the ground, having created a large mushroom, almost like a mountain. You'd think an atomic bomb had just been dropped from the earth. Everything into the air. Shinobi. Trees. Chunks of earth. Violent winds that even threatened them even from where they flew. Sai's eyes didn't widen. But the explosion was big enough to wrap around almost all of Konoha. If that had been driven into Konoha, the village would have been turning into history now. He turned away, driving his bird away from the scene. "How do you stop that kind of chakra?" "Something of equal force," Naruto replied in a flat tone, his eyes closed. He didn't want to look. Hundreds if not thousands of shinobi were going to die, if they were not already dead. He'd done something similar to Iwagakure. A normal Rasen shuriken is hard to stop as it is. Sai could imagine Danzo ordering for Naruto's death after the war. That is if Sasuke couldn't manipulate him with his Sharingan. "You've surpassed the numbers of Father got during the Third War." The Kyubi said a bit gleefully. "You enjoy this too much." "I'm trying not to." "Well, less shinobi mean less humans who come after Baijuu. Not to mention, reduces population." The Kyubi smiled. "But you're going to be famous after this." "I'm not sure I wanted to be famous in this way," Naruto said bitterly. To be responsible for the deaths of thousands was going to be a burden. But he would carry it. But at least with power, shinobi will listen. "You are only going to get hated," Isabu replied. "And feared." "I can imagine the people in Konoha trembling with fear. Surely they will recognize their actions and think, what if you turn on them?" The Kyubi laughed. "But you're not going to do that. You're not even going to allow this power to get the best of you. Because you are Naruto. A compliment from you? Naruto smiled. I'll take it. That is more like telling me that I am truly different from the rest of the humans. His smile became bitter as he added. But I want to say I am not. After all, this is what I am willing to do. It is war. A war you did not start. You only have one path in war, and that is victory. Most humans are unwilling to surrender after losing some men. They think those who died would have died for nothing and thus continue to fight, Isabu said. That is everything wrong with shinobi. Naruto? Naruto opened his eyes and glanced up at Sai for a moment before glancing to the side. Sorry, got lost in thought. You were saying something? No. Tsunade had yet to even sit by the command center tent with Shikaku when an Anbu appeared without warning. She hoped there was good news. Because there was the possibility of bad news, she sat down beside the large table with a map and then stared expressionlessly at the masked woman. We have lost contact with others accompanying Shizune-san. The slug princess created a fist, gritting her teeth silently. She didn't need this bad news. Shizune had to be fine. She had to be. What happened? We do not know. Go find out. Hi. Tsunade was silent. Shizune was needed in battle for her medical expertise. Sakura was in the front lines. It had been a good decision sending her out there. More people would have died in the capital of mushrooms if she hadn't gone there. But it was her movement to get closer to the battlefield that brought about this effect. If she hadn't received Jiraiya's word, it would have been her who had lost contact. She didn't want to think anything bad, but there was a possibility. Tsunade shoved the thought at the back of her head and then stared at the silent Shikaku. Jiraiya informed us that there is a possibility that Iwa was going to attack our most useful shinobi. Naruto told him of this after going through his own test, the god Im said in a serious tone. Shikaku didn't want to ask about what was happening with Shizune. Obviously, it was nothing pleasant. So, there was no planned attack on this site. No. According to Naruto, those people said they were going for him. They must have known that Naruto was moving toward this place. Tsunade closed her eyes, trying to deny the implications. Trying to test if there is a spy among us, I departed Konoha secretly and had Shizune use a transformation jutsu to be disguised as me. And now she was possibly attacked. But the fact that they didn't know that, just means that they are watching from afar. But not just one person, Shikaku said. Someone with good eyes was observing movements from behind. It was bad if Iwagakure had this much knowledge of where they were positioning their shinobi. However, the fact that Tsunade arrived here without any trouble just meant that they were not really close to them. If they keep things private, they could still avoid any intel leaking. Yes, that may likely the case. Have a team from the Hyuga to scout the areas to see if there isn't anything we have missed, Tsunade ordered before asking. How goes the battle? Naruto dealt heavy damages to Iwagakure shinobi earlier. He is already moving toward Kumo to deal the same damage. It should thin down their numbers a bit and make the cloud move in haste. Naruto had basically become a weapon for Konoha. To be tossed into battlefields to murder hundreds. But there was no other way to use him. Ultimately, those with power always did the most. Carried more burden. It was no wonder they never lived that long. They always died in battle. The Naidaime, Sandaime, and Yondaime all died in battle. Tsunade hoped to break this curse. Any movement in the rain? No. It was Inoiki who responded. Iwa isn't even trying to go through it. Their attacks are focused on mushrooms and canyon. But that Tsuchikage and his granddaughter appear to be moving toward canyon. They are likely to engage Kumo in the country. Battles always occurred in the small nations. Amigakure was usually the unfortunate nation. But now, both canyon and mushrooms were battlegrounds. The latter having already suffered. It was no wonder the smaller nations disliked the great nations. What of Taki's Jinchuriki? Nothing as yet. Taki is probably keeping her close to protect itself. It isn't even moving like Kusagakure. I see, Tsunade fell silent. Leaving Danzo alone in Konoha did make her uncomfortable. But as long as she survived, there would be no play for him to make. Maybe she should order Jiraiya to head back to Konoha. With Iwa acting in this manner, there wasn't any reason to believe they might not try something against their village. When Naruto dropped to the ground, he closed his eyes and settled into a meditative position. He wasn't resting that much. He'd hardly slept the night before because it was war and he was moving alone. Having been attacked before, dozing off like he was in his bed could prove fatal. Kakashi and his people were preparing to move toward the canyon as Iwa was already doing the same. But Naruto had no appetite to go back there. He just wanted a bit of rest. He'd never tried the jutsu be used today. He was training at war. Are you okay? It was Sakura's concerned tone. Sai just stood there, watching him. Naruto opened his eyes and smiled weakly at the girl. Yeah. It is good if you're fine. There is a bit of situation, Kakashi said, walking over to him. Come, let us talk. He wasn't going to rest much. Then again, Naruto had known today would be a bad day for him. He'd known he'd be moving about in battles. He stood up and followed the Jonin. Once away from everyone else, Kakashi spoke. We left some men to join Guy and the others. Even Yamato has gone that side to aid Kuza. We are moving toward where the main battle is going to be. Kakashi glanced at Naruto and then spoke. Felt the explosion. It was big. I can imagine. Either way, we are asking a lot from you. Naruto glanced at Kakashi, then adopted an expressionless mask. Sensei, I have killed over 1,000 people since this war began. And I'm going to kill more. Kakashi smiled sadly. There was something he wanted to tell the blonde, but he didn't want to end up distracting him from the mission. So, it was a bit difficult to tell. Shizune has been killed along with a squad of Anbu. One of Iwa's Jinchuriki is within the Fire Nation. Tsunade-sama has called for you to swiftly track him down and deal with the danger. You're going to have to be swift because there is still another one and we don't know where he is. But there is the fear that the one who attacked Shizune will head toward Konoha and hold it hostage. Everybody losses, huh? Naruto turned away from Kakashi. He didn't even look back as he took the direction of the Fire Nation. Sakura was probably not told about this. As far as he was concerned, she had a close relationship with that woman. She was a good person. But everyone could die in this bloody field. Good or bad. It was nonetheless the bad that usually trampled on those weak and good. How was Tsunade even going to deal with this? Naruto couldn't imagine the pain. The loss she must be experiencing. Perhaps she would try to bottle things inside and then try to deal with it once the war was over. But having already lost so much, Naruto thought after this, she was likely to choose a successor. Danzo couldn't be more pleased seeing the reports from Sai. Naruto had turned into a weapon fully capable of protecting the leaf. He'd never thought that Tsunade would use the blonde like this. She held some deep attachments to the boy and she had not thought she would be willing to use him like a weapon. The damage he'd caused to Kumo and Iwa was worth it. Not even he would have used him like that. He wouldn't have plotted it like that. But it had happened before his eyes. In any case, this was good. He just needed to get his hands on the blonde. Control him and he would control things within the elemental nations. With the losses Kumo and Iwa's forces have suffered, it was going to make Konoha stronger. But he knew, Tsunade wouldn't push things to an end by getting rid of both enemy cage. She was too weak and nice for that. He had stepped out of Konoha because he needed to get the job finished. Are we finally ready to move? Danzo glanced at the frustrated Uchiha before him and then nodded. We have a job that we must execute. What job? The Tsuchikage and the Reikage. We must kill them. Tsunade will not do so. But we must move in before she does. If we do that, we end this war. Sasuke stared at the man with an expressionless mask. He knew what Danzo wanted. The man never said it to him, but he wasn't stupid or blind that he would not see what was happening under his nose. Danzo was plotting. He wanted power. Even if he didn't gain the power of Hokage, he planned on getting the power of both Cloud and Stone and he could use that to achieve his beloved dream. I don't think Naruto is going to permit you to do as you please. Surely, Naruto's power was too great now. It was more than what he had anticipated. He was useful all right, but after the war, Konoha would manage without him. Danzo didn't even need a tool he couldn't control. Isn't that where you're supposed to come in? And do what exactly? Anything that becomes a nuisance to my plans must be removed. We cannot have Naruto if he isn't for us. The Kyuubi can be taken from him. That was the good thing about Jinkairiki. You could change them. He could train his perfect weapon. I wouldn't have a problem engaging him. Sasuke was still bitter about his loss. Of course, he had no intentions of actually doing things for Danzo. The second they were in the battlefield, he was going to shoot an arrow straight at Danzo's back and finish him off. Aniki nearly thought of destroying the messenger with his particle style. It appeared that the only good thing he has done in this war was to keep Kurotsuchi alive. Did he also send her toward the blonde? No, Naruto was dangerous. Too dangerous for anyone. Like father like son. The real problem was that he had failed in dealing with the Hokage and instead got the assistant. It was only going to make that woman gun at him. Worse, Naruto was doing heavy damage. But not as much as he has done against Kumo. He could at least afford a cold smile knowing that I was seething wherever he was. Just one shinobi had unsettled them. But how glad was he that the same jutsu that hit Kumo hadn't hit them. The danger was that it could happen to them. Nonetheless, with Han in the Fire Country, Konoha was likely to change Naruto's position to deal with this threat. Minato's jutsu wasn't even worse as this one. After all, his son could literally destroy an entire great village by himself. Kinjutsu. Anaki had never quite had to deal with such feats during war. But with Konoha, anything just seemed possible. He faced Kurotsuchi. She was the future for Iwa. He could not doubt her strength and dedication. But the danger ahead was too much. People were dying. The danger to everyone was that people always thought they wouldn't be the ones to die. Go home. What? Kurotsuchi blinked with surprise at the sharp words from her stern-faced grandfather. I fear that if you stay here, you will die. If we both die, it will be bad for Iwa. I'm old. I have lived long enough. Why are you talking like you're giving up? Kurotsuchi was confident. Sure, they had faced some setbacks. But they were still pushing and still had their 2 Jinchuriki. There was no need to panic. Kurotsuchi, Anaki started in a calm tone. I am not giving up. But I have lived long enough to know that things don't always occur as planned in war. We are going to the final battle. Once we engage Kumo, there won't be stopping until the other abandons battle. The raikage is coming. You've done enough. You need to watch the village from now on. I will take over. But old man. It is an order. I will have people drag you back home if you think you can disobey me. And like that, Anaki looked away before adding. We killed the Hokage's assistant, they might retaliate by targeting you. Death. The end. It began with birth and ended with death. Each story ended with death, not the fall from grace. After all, anything was possible as long as one was still alive. For Naruto, there was much to do. Yet so little time. He had to do many things in this war. For the future. For his plans to prosper. But he was surrounded by corpses. The smell of death. And a faint giggle from the death god. How envious it was for his soul. He had a feeling, it wouldn't be long before he would be caught within its inescapable embrace. For now, he would move until his body could permit it no more. He would kill. Murder those who stood in the way. He would take from others. Because, he had to do. It is good I caught up to you before you returned to the side of Iwagakure. It would have been bothersome had it been the other way. Han came to a halt, and then glanced up into a tree. A blonde was standing on a tree branch, staring down at him with unmasked intentions. Konoha shinobi. No doubt, they'd already found out about what happened. His target had been the god Im, but it looked that the leaf had been prepared. If he wasn't mistaken, the blonde was the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki. It is good that you came to me. Oh, so, Iwagakure had intentions against other Jinchuriki as well. Then it is good that I kept my abilities hidden. What abilities? Naruto jumped down to the ground. Nothing really. But I'll need the Baijuu within you. The result of which, you'll die. You'll need to defeat me first. Naruto smiled. Needless. I am Uzumaki. I do not to fight you. Besides, I had to use much of my chakra before coming here. Using more even if it means indulging you would be disastrous. I sense that the climax will arrive quickly. At which case, I must be ready. Tsunade stared at the map in front of her with an expressionless mask. Battlefields were marked. People were losing their lives. Shinobi lived and died in battle. But this was war. Something was always lost. She'd already lost too much. Tsunade didn't think she would be losing more precious things to her once more. She'd almost lost Jiraiya. And now, she lost Shizune. Had it been her in that location, it would have been death to her. They had faced a Jinchuriki known for his power. Even she wouldn't have gotten out of it alive. Yet a part of her felt as if she had sacrificed Shizune. They had taken different paths and done as they did because of the intelligence they received, but never did she think that something like that would happen. Anaki had taken a massive risk by sending one of his Jinchuriki into the Fire Nation, but what if there were plans to attack the Hidden Leaf? This war couldn't go any longer. Lest people become desperate and start such attacks on their villages. With the damages even Kumo has suffered, it would no doubt be in a hurry to end things. After all, Naruto inflicted massive casualties on them. Anaki has sent his granddaughter back to Iwa knowing of his failed mission to assassinate you. Tsunade glanced up to Shikaku. And then scoffed. Kurotsuchi was his likely successor, and in trying to secure his village's future, he was sending her back to protect her. The question was whether Konoha was willing to do something about it. He has no problems in trying to take us out but fears being taken out. She replied with anger. The bottled anger of losing Shizune. But doing this makes it easy for us to get to her while she is on the move. He probably thinks that Konoha has no spine to launch an attack on retreating people. She wanted to laugh in bitterness. And Aniki wasn't especially wrong in his judgment. But maybe this could be traced back to her sensei. If it had been the Nidaime, he wouldn't have made such a move. That man was brutal and cold in his methods. He would reply by sending people after Kurotsuchi. Are we? What have you decided? Tsunade asked. There are more important things to deal with at the moment. Our forces are already stretched. Right now, we need to reprioritize and focus on the meeting with the cage. Tsunade nodded in agreement. I was already speeding toward meeting the Tsuchikage. They would soon engage. He must have decided to avoid more casualties, he needed to end things quickly. Kumo wasn't the only village to have suffered, even Iwagakure. Without Naruto's efforts, we would still be looking for more days in battle. Shikaku nodded. A cruel role Naruto had to do. He'd ended up having to kill thousands of shinobi. The losses made the cage want to end things, because the attacks would still come again. And given their destructive powers, there was no way to stop them aside from killing the person. They could as well say Naruto was using Kinjutsu, and that was without turning into the full power of the Kyuubi. Not to mention, both Iwa and Kumo should know by now that Naruto's presence makes their Baijuu power useless. He'd already taken that of Kumo, and Iwa would soon learn of their own demise as well, if they haven't already. Which is why we must take advantage of this situation. Iwa is also moving half its forces toward meeting Kumo. The cloud is spread out, its forces in 5 units, to avoid mass casualties once again. But they are all marching. We can attack their rear if we want. I'm going to enter the battlefield. I will engage Aniki and the Raikage. That is my fight. Jiraiya will move in with me. You can have Naruto attack the rear, Tsunade replied with her eyes closed. Shikaku didn't think the Raikage was the best opponent for Tsunade, neither was the Tsuchikage. That was considering both their abilities. But he wasn't going to argue with her. She would have Jiraiya with her. Besides, he did think that Danzo was going to take this opportunity to show himself, to steal the thunder. He would like to stop it. But he was thinking Danzo was going to take the credit for ending this war. When do you depart? Before the day ends. Have the message relayed, Tsunade said. Where is Naruto? Shikaku shook his head. I do not know. Tsunade didn't like that Naruto appeared to move on his own. He still had clones fighting another battlefield, but his original body had marched back into the Fire Nation to face Iwa's Jinchuriki. Find out where he is and have the message relayed to him. I want him to move fast. The moment he arrived, Yugito had a weary feeling. No, since she rejected his offer from his clone, she has been feeling rather uncomfortable. The clone had left her alone to get lost in her thoughts. It hadn't given her the peace of mind but made her clouded. There was still a war. She was held a prisoner. She didn't know what was happening to her fellow shinobi, but what she knew was that people were dying. It was a question of who. Not on which side. Each side bled in war. No one remained without a loss. But to the loser, the losses were heavy. She hoped her village was still raging strong. B and the Raikage were there. They were immensely powerful. What stressed her greatly was the person in front of her. His expression frightened her. It wasn't anything scary, it was just that she couldn't read him. And the clone had left a rather ominous message for her. You need not be so tense. I don't see any reason I shouldn't be. She was still bound, couldn't use her chakra. She didn't exactly know where she even was. Naruto waved off his right hand, dismissing her concerns. You made a choice. You ought to face the consequences bravely. I can't betray my village. I never asked you to do so. It is betrayal in my eyes if I make a choice that goes against everything I stand for. I am a Kumo Kunoichi and my power is to be used for the sake of the cloud. Nothing more. Naruto shook his head and then smiled sadly. I actually gave you the choice because I didn't want to kill you. Guren says I am a little too nice. Perhaps that is true. Guren? No one important. But I really had hoped I wouldn't have to kill you. He closed his eyes for a moment. I have killed many people. I just killed another Jinchuriki, and what do you think is next? She was next. She knew, he didn't necessarily need the power of her Baijuu. But he knew that if he left her be, she was just going to go back to Kumo and be a problem. There was only one option and that was to kill her. You said I shouldn't be tense, but the truth is, nobody can be calm in the face of death. I don't want to die, Yugito said firmly. I want to live. Everyone wants to live, Yugito. Even those who choose to die, if they had other options, they would choose to live. But sometimes, we must make choices. And I have made mine. Yugito smiled bitterly. For all her confidence in her power, this was a cruel way to die. To die without being able to use her power. All that training had been for nothing. She was mad. But she still couldn't betray her village. Even when she really wanted to live. Then be still. Naruto smiled. I am not sorry your life must end. I do wish things could have been different. But in this life, we don't always get our wishes. Things happen. We live and we die. Can you at least tell me how things are? If I'm willing to do this, it means that your village is going to lose. Both Stone and Cloud are racing to end things quickly before they become crippled. If things continue as they are, the war will see an end soon. Both Stone and Cloud will lose. Yugito became worried. Naruto seemed assured that this was going to happen. She couldn't see it. They were supposed to have the advantage in terms of firepower. How could they not be winning this war? The question brought her back to her own state. She frowned deeply. What will happen? Nothing bad. We are not that cruel that we would seek the destruction of innocent people. But that is only if Danzo doesn't find some way to get his behind in the Hokage Tower. If he does so, then he will most likely put both villages under Konoha's rule. A recipe for another disaster. Such wouldn't be achieved without more bloodshed. It would just make people hate Konoha, and the allies it now had would abandon it. Naruto wasn't going to permit that to happen. Not in his lifetime. You can rest in peace. Yugito laughed in response. Rest in peace? He was being ridiculous. Her village was going to lose a war. At least as far as he was telling her. How could she rest in peace with that in mind? She'd already lost someone valuable to her. Some others could be dying as she spoke now. And he was telling her to rest in peace. For some reason, she did think he was telling the truth. But Naruto wasn't the Hokage. The fate of her village did not rest in him. Couldn't there be another way out? Kakashi was relieved to see both Tsunade and Jiraiya join them. There had been losses on the side after facing off Iwagakure. Naruto had still done most of the damage, but they were still suffering. But the presence of these two just meant that this was coming to a close. Not the pain and suffering, just the bloodshed. The pain would continue with them for the rest of their lives. You're looking miserable, Kakashi, Tsunade said to the Jonin in a hardened tone. Kakashi, I smiled. We are at war, he replied with a slight shrug of his shoulders. That we are, Tsunade said, looking around. She frowned. There was no sign of Naruto. She could sense and see the others, but still no sign of the blonde. Had something happened to him? No, if he has fallen to enemy hands, then she would know about it. What had happened then? Didn't Naruto come here? It was Jiraiya who asked. Kakashi shook his head. He didn't say anything immediately. He was alarmed by the tone of the Sannin. Is there something wrong? There might be. What? As things stand, Naruto is missing in action. Chapter 14, The End and Beginning. The last attack had the life in him flash before his very eyes. Despite seeing many wars, death, blood and shinobi becoming savages in battle, the sight of man losing their lives in the blink of an eye still shook him. The nature of shinobi meant that he didn't even care about the lives of others who didn't wear Iwa's headband. But perhaps, this was the scene others have expressed when facing the power of the Iwas by Juu. Aniki hadn't thought that the war would be so disastrous for him. He'd amassed battle power over the years. Yet even with all that, he couldn't tip the scales to his favor. The glaring reality frustrated him to no end. The demons barked at him in laughter, sarcastically praising his arrogance. But the one reeling the most had to be the man standing in front of him. After all, the damage done to Kumagakure by Naruto felt personal. He'd decimated their numbers. They not only lost one of their Jinchuriki, they also lost thousands in just one attack. He was impressed that the man continued to attack even now. A weaker man would have been demoralized and quit the fighting. No, a smart person wouldn't continue. At least he still had his life. If the fighting continued, he would lose more. But abandoning the fight without conceding defeat would be a strategic retreat. It would not doom his village to the arm of any other nation. The Raikage was an emotional man who valued power more than anything. He knew the bloodbaths of war and what came after it, and yet, he was here. Truly, men never learnt anything. Even when knowing the consequences, they continued to paint the earth with blood and bones. Shinobi were never going to change. Aniki had thought he'd seen it all. Maybe he had. Nothing really surprised him. At least in the attitude of Shinobi. No war has ever gone like this. Then again, there was a time Kumo had Kinkaku and Ginkaku, those possessed brothers. Now, it had a handful of Shinobi. If the Raikage died, Kumo would be reduced to nothing. It was the same for him. Kurotsuchi was smart, but in terms of raw power, she was quite nothing like him or his predecessors. The younger generation continued to grow weaker. But it couldn't be said the same for Konoha. The Leaf still had shinobi who could surpass the previous generation. With an army behind him, Aniki stepped forward. The Raikage did the same. The man looked incensed. Understandable. Konoha had given him sharp lashes. If they continued, both his arms would be chopped and he would have no more fighting ability. We should talk, Aniki said in a hardened tone, yet dripping with some hopelessness. What is the point of continuing? At this rate, we are just going to kill each other and leave our villages poor. The future, Aniki was at an age where he worried about that. Maybe he had been hasty in taking a part of this. He should have done everything possible to delay this war or stop it. Maybe it was his greed that led him to this path and he couldn't change it. Who would have thought that the scales would be flipped over like this? Not even Minato had moved this fast in the battlefield to cause this much damage. Once more, they had to count their losses and think of a truce. There was just no other way. A continuation of this meant more blood would be lost and all for nothing. You say that now after everything? A gritted his teeth anger. His lightning cloak flickered to life for a moment. That moment, Iwa shinobi surrounded their leader. Aniki waved them off, sensing A wasn't going to attack him so cowardly. I watched my men die in seconds. He seethed. Thousands have died. The men he led, all wiped within seconds because of just one person. Giving up now meant surrendering to Konoha's power. They couldn't be given that advantage. That power had to be removed. A was willing to give his life if he could end Naruto's life. Aniki thought that A was being childish. No grown adult should be crying about loss of life in war. It was just plain naivety. What did you think was going to happen? This is war. To be lectured by this old man, A had no appetite for it. It was kill or be killed. That was the common rule. And yet, it didn't mean he had to display indifference when his men died without even stepping onto the battlefield. I know we are at war. But those were my men. We all suffer in war. Aniki applauded himself for managing to say that with an air of indifference. At this rate, we should consider calling it war. A more sinister thought came into mind. Konoha was not even a part of this war. They inserted themselves. They are the problem. And we cannot argue that the village will be left at a much stronger position if we leave things as they are. Maybe they could settle old scores. Regardless, it wasn't just Kumo that suffered, he too had suffered. Besides, Aniki was afraid of the retribution that would come from Konoha for the death of Shizune. Not to mention, his Jinchuriki hasn't returned. It probably meant he was captured. Both could be gone at this rate. I can let slide our war for now. Konoha captured one of my Jinchuriki. They are the object of my anger. Truly, nothing would make him better than crushing the Leaf. He would fight with everything he has for the honor of his village. A had no problem in shaking hands with Iwagakure. They had yet to engage anyway. He could close his eye and deal with the Leaf. It would be a pity. Tsunade wasn't a bad person. It was war nonetheless. No one was good or bad. You were either friend or foe. There was no disarming, just crushing of the enemy. Chop off their legs and they still crawl to stab you in the back when you least expect it. Can we agree on that? But as soon as we are through with the Leaf, we are turning on you. Not if I get you first. Aniki thought mildly as he turned away from the Raikage. The moment he did so, I felt something from his back. It was his instincts that he glanced back and saw a purple arrow flying in blinding speed toward him. The shinobi behind him were shouting. He ignored the voice, his lightning cloak burst around him and has disappeared in a blur. The arrow went through his afterimage. Tsuchikage-sama. Tsuchikage-sama. Earlier. Sai was a little uncomfortable once summoned by Danzo. By the way he departed from Kakashi's company, there was just no way he was going to explain himself. He'd spent a considerable amount of time with those people that he had come to like them. Worse, they would suspect he had gone to this man and he wouldn't have a way back. But maybe that was the intention and his master was finally making a move. Seeing Sasuke just confirmed that there was a move to be made. A war to win. And the realization of a long dream. He hoped there would be no agenda to tackle the Hokage. Danzo-sama. Sai kneeled before his lord. Danzo only narrowed his eyes before asking. How are things? Kumo and Iwa should be colliding now. The god Hokage is heading there now. She is continuing even after her assistant was murdered. Is she not planning something? There was word that the granddaughter of the Tsuchikage was retreating. But she chose not to set up an ambush for them. Naive. With the losses their enemies have suffered, sparring a couple of their shinobi to deal with Kurotsuchi would be a smart choice. She was only going to become a problem for them in the future. She could already be home by now. It was no matter, he would deal with it. What of Naruto? We lost contact with him after he was sent to Iwa's Jinchuriki within the Fire Nation. There has been nothing as yet. Naruto was in possession of other Jinchuriki. The thought left Danzo with an uncomfortable feeling in his mind. Naruto had fought the two tails in one, and yet there was no word about the Jinchuriki. He didn't want to assume the worst. The blonde's power had grown extraordinarily nonetheless. And Danzo didn't think it was power best kept. A weapon was treacherously dangerous if you couldn't always subdue it in case it decided to serve another master. Go find him. Watch him. Watching him may arouse some suspicion, but I can try to track him down. Sai had learned that Naruto wasn't a person you wanted to spy on. And as this war has proved, the blonde was not some naive child. He was ruthless. If it became apparent that he was working for the sake of Danzo and not the Hokage, there was no telling what Naruto would do to him. Naruto is a good censor, he added. Just find him and keep us aware of his location. Once we are done, we will deal with him. At this rate, Naruto was likely to stand in the way even if Tsunade found her demise in the war. Once his heroics became known to the villagers, they were going to sing him praises. They wouldn't want to lose someone who could protect them. He glanced at the silent Uchiha and then nodded inwardly. He could trust Sasuke to delicately deal with Naruto if it came to it. With Kumo and Iwa decimated, all that power was unnecessary. He could use that time to create a weapon that would be loyal to him. Sasuke wanted nothing but battle. He wanted to test the Uchiha powers he wielded. This war gave him an opportunity to do so. And then, he would cut off Danzo. For now, he could play the obedient puppet. Why are we still waiting here? From where they stood, they could see Kumo and Iwa heading for a head-on collision. The two were the ones who started the damn war. And it was their time. Konoha was also on the day. Danzo wanted to handle things before Tsunade arrived. She wasn't going to give her blessing to slaughter of her fellow change. There are two armies. If you think you can go to that battlefield openly, then you can do so. The arrogance of the Uchiha. It was just the four of them. Attempting to attack this group would be suicidal. Not to mention, there was hell to pay for the damage Naruto inflicted on both nations. The best option was to lay low and attack at the right moment. Two things are going to happen: they are going to collide or conspire against Konoha. If it is the latter, we cannot do anything until Konoha arrives. Why would they team up? Shinobi will always feel threatened by great power. A common cause will always get shinobi to fight side by side. Right now, Konoha has displayed an overwhelming strength that could threaten the future independence of both nations. They have to deal with it now. One of Danzo's guards replied to Sasuke. There are no real enemies? Sasuke was certain there was no such thought in Danzo. If the man was part of that agreement, he'd stab both in the back the moment their objective was completed. It was always get them before they get you. It looks like there will be no collision. Danzo was silent. I didn't think they would actually turn on Konoha. If Naruto isn't to be found, and Konoha engages them, it would prove disastrous. Individually, they were weakened, but together, their might could twist this war on its head and doom the leaf. Danzo couldn't have such a thing. I thought you'd be happy to see the Hokage crushed. I am not irrational. Allowing Konoha's forces to be crushed will not be good for the future. The leaf has lost a great deal to Iwa. Danzo replied in a flat tone. Can you hit one of them from here? I'd need to get a little closer and into a higher position. Good. Danzo nodded. I'll give you the signal. Present. Who dares? A roared, glaring toward the direction the arrow came from. He didn't care to look if the Tsuchikage had managed to avoid the arrow. How was it that it managed to slip through the many shinobi who were around? For such a projectile, even if its speed was tremendous, someone should have at least picked it up. It was, after all, traveling in air. Go look, he shouted toward Daru. Hi. He glanced back at the Tsuchikage. The damn old man was still alive. But the arrow had taken his left shoulder. Instincts of an experienced shinobi saved him. Even though they had an agreement, I would have been happy if the old man died. Hell, he was even considering ordering his men to destroy Iwa. Konoha wasn't around. He could crush Iwa and then negotiate with Konoha. Tsunade was sensible. She would agree to talk to him and call an end to this. But first, he needed to find the person who dared attack them and then deal with them. He could deal with Aniki later. He was now useless, not even in battle against Konoha. Without a hand, a shriveled body, he couldn't use his destructive ninjutsu anymore. Aniki grimaced, holding onto his shoulder. One of his shinobi was applying medical ninjutsu and Kyuchi standing in front in case the Raikage decided to attack him. This wasn't the end, but to think he would get hit by something like that. The attack had appeared out of nowhere and moved in blinding speed. Kyuchi. He called with a grim face. Tsuchikage-sama. Take charge. What? Our alliance with the Raikage is over, Aniki said through gritted teeth. He values power. I am old and have turned into this. He won't think I can mount any challenge with Konoha. Once he finds who did this, he is going to turn to us. Even though we just had agreement? Conditional. And we are still at war. Aniki wasn't even shocked. The second he was hit he knew it was over. Agreements that have looked stronger were broken easily. Treachery was part of the trade. Shinobi made empty promises. You only trusted the word of a shinobi when you wore the same headband but another from a different village? It was just suicidal. He didn't have his right hand, and thus couldn't use jutsu anymore. At this rate, he was useless in battle. Truly useless. He could only use the opportunity to save the lives of his shinobi before Aide decided to turn on them. No, as soon as he was done with his search, he was going to turn on them. Retreat, Aniki said firmly. I'll talk to the Raikage. Are you sure? Kyuchi wanted to question his father, but he was still that Tsuchikage and was thinking what was best for the village, regardless of his health. It is an order. Kyuchi was rooted to the same spot. He didn't want the person who attacked him to suddenly launch another attack. Konoha was throwing large-scale attacks that resulted in wide-scale casualties. As you wish. He closed his eyes. But let me leave a handful a man. No more than 100. TSK. Sasuke frowned deeply after landing below a tree. The second he made his attack, they had quickly moved to a different location, away from the enemy forces. He'd been certain he would kill both or one of them. But he missed. He missed. And it would only be a matter of time before they were found. At which case, they would have to fight all those people. At this, that Tsuchikage was out of commission. With just one arm, he couldn't weave hand signs. It meant there would be no jutsu. With his old body, ninjutsu was his only weapon. How did you do that? Sasuke shrugged. He would have to thank Naruto. There was no way to shoot an arrow from that distance and nobody would notice. Even if someone could sense it, if they didn't see anything, they would think it was just their senses, and by the time they realized what had happened, it would be too late. Genjutsu, he replied flatly. What now? We wait for Konoha. They are going to find us. They won't. Somebody has, Sasuke said with a glare. Who? Danzo narrowed his eyes dangerously when Naruto suddenly appeared in front of him. Surrounded by trees, the blonde was casually walking toward them. A blank look on his face. He glanced at Sasuke to check his reaction. It was just contempt. It was good, the Uchiha would not betray him and do something stupid. You have saved us the trouble of looking for you. I was looking for you as well. That's why I disappeared from battle. I had figured you'd be making your move now. And I thought it best to stop you. Stop him? Then the blonde was going to go against him. Someone like that didn't have any right to live. Anyway, he had Sasuke and the blonde had already done his part. Kumo and Iwa have just formed an agreement. I assume they are planning to attack Konoha together. It would be best for you to focus on them. Remove enemies of Konoha, huh? Naruto asked mildly. That Kumo and Iwa had joined hands was surprising. But not unthinkable. And if they did so, Konoha would be in bind. There would be two Kage to deal with. Naruto hadn't thought they would make such a move. But war was a survival battle. People would do anything to survive, even if it meant teaming up with the very reason you went into war in the first place. He could handle that. His main problem was Danzo. The Uchiha beside the War Hawk was irrelevant. Never mind the two guards. They had to be skilled. But Naruto didn't come to fight them. He came to simply kill Danzo before engaging in Iwa and Kumo, for their doom. That is the best tea. Danzo's words died on his throat. In the blink of an eye, Naruto had disappeared. Vanishing before he could even blink. The blonde appeared in front of him, hand on his throat. How had he moved so fast? His guards weren't able to compete with that speed. But Sasuke had his Sharingan activated. He should have been able to do something. He glanced toward the Uchiha and saw a look of indifference. When his guards made movements, Naruto let him go and then vanished into thin air. It was as if he had teleported. Feeling weak, Danzo fell to his knees. He glanced down and saw a kunai through his chest. How did he now see that? How? Izanagi couldn't save him. The jutsu would only rewrite a reality that occurred while it was active. Sasuke. Danzo growled, trying to get the Uchiha to move. He couldn't possibly allow his life to end like this. There were still many cards he could play. He was right at the end of things. With the deaths of both Ei and Aniki, he would gain control over their nations. Tsunade could be handled quickly. He was going to make sure she never returned to Konoha. I am not saving you. He just did the job for me anyway. I was planning on killing you myself. Sasuke replied, glaring down at the war hawk with an air of indifference. Traitor, Danzo hissed. I was never loyal. I made a mistake, then. He should have used Shisui's eye. But the Uchiha had proved easy to manipulate and had been willing to move. Danzo didn't think he would turn on him so quickly. Deal with them, Danzo ordered his guards. Hi, Danzo-san. There was a buzz of static. Danzo was rooted to the ground, but Sasuke had moved as fast as lightning. He was just on the side, holding out his sword with his right hand. Slowly, he sheathed it. You damn traitor. Yule, the knee agent wasn't able to finish his words as blood exploded out from his head. The strike from Sasuke had split his head in two. The strike ended just on his neck. He fell down with a shower of blood. What? The second knee's words died on his throat as Sasuke lifted his right hand. A lightning blade shot from his index finger, piercing through the man's heart. How flashy, Naruto commented with a roll of his eyes. Showing off, Sasuke-kun? Sasuke shot him a glare. You never trust anyone, Danzo said, calm as ever. But inwardly, he was in turmoil. No. No. This could not be his end. Danzo couldn't die here. His dream was within grasp. He was a step away from his dream and he wouldn't have to conquer both Iwa and Kumo. Their cage were going to die and he could install his people. He couldn't end like this. He had to live. He had a dream to see through. If I'm going to die, I'm taking both of you with me. You're both threats to Konoha. The second he finished speaking, black marks spread around him. Naruto didn't even have to think, he immediately leapt away in haste. Sasuke watched him curiously and turned to face Danzo. Boom! A black explosion rocked the area, covering a wide range. Trees were blown away by the explosion. It rose high, like a mushroom. It took a minute before everything died down. What remained was a large crater, with no sign of Danzo. Naruto landed at the edge of the crater, shaking his head. Suicidal, he said. Man just cannot die alone. His former teammate landed behind him. He appeared fine. Naruto faced Sasuke with an expressionless mask. He couldn't even begin to think what the Uchiha was thinking. Either way, he really didn't care. Unless he was planning on attacking him, Naruto was just going to make his departure and face up to the opponents up ahead. I'd wondered what I'd do to you if we met up again under such circumstances. Naruto cocked his head to the side. What was the thought? He asked curiously. Kill you. He smiled. I wouldn't be surprised. You don't want to do it then? He paused. Not that you could actually do it. I am not the same as I was. Sure. Danzo has trained you. He would do a better job than Orochimaru. But what does that change? The Mangekyo? He shook his head. Flashy eyes, yes. If you're not going to attack, then don't get in my way, he said, turning away from the Uchiha. You're going to kill those two Kage. It is what it will take for the war to end. Their deaths also puts Konoha in a good position. Not that this was his goal. It would just be a consequence of his actions. There are other threats that are still around. I heard you're missing in action. Naruto blinked and then cracked a laughter. Yes. That could be true. He cocked his head slightly. Where are you going? I know Itachi is still alive. I'm going to kill him. Naruto simply nodded and then waved his right hand, moving away from Sasuke. A few minutes later. There was no greater humiliation than this. I hadn't thought things would come to this point. It ultimately meant they didn't have the power they thought they had. At any rate, there was a loss of blood. His men dead, for nothing. Their families back at home would be weeping. Shinobi were always prepared to die, Ei had at least thought he would take victory back home. He glanced into the sky, the sun was setting. Perhaps it was drawing even the conclusion of this war. Ei-sama, Daru spoke to him, his voice unusually serious. We can't find out who, but there was an explosion we heard. Should we go check it out? Shook his head. No, he said. It seems that Tsuchikage is sending his people away. Let them leave. Give the order to lead everyone back home. He must protect everyone until they reach Kumagakure. Hi. Daru breathed freely. What of me? You're going to be with me. We're going to talk to the Tsuchikage. I'm sure the Hokage will be joining us soon. We will talk, the three of us, about the end of this war and the way forward. Hi. A turn toward to the Tsuchikage. He'd been smart enough to send his granddaughter back home and away from the battlefield when he saw how bleak things were. He slowly walked toward the old man. I could finish you off right now, I said with contempt. I wouldn't be able to defend myself. Why don't you? I'm not petty and it would achieve nothing at this point. Says the man who moments ago was crying about the loss of his shinobi. Aniki snorted. Things happen a little too quickly. But at least, the Raikage had adopted a listening frame. Of course, we could still decide to kill Tsunade, the Tsuchikage added. Without question, Konoha would be in a better position compared to the rest of them. This was due to its fighting strategy. Aniki would admit, ending things was now a priority. And he didn't care if he died, but if he could take the Hokage with him, Iwagakure wouldn't be the only village to have suffered greatly. A sneered. In your state, what can you do? Nothing really, Aniki conceded. If he was younger, there could be physical battle, he'd aged. He recognized he would die the moment he lunged into battle because of his inability to use ninjutsu. Well, I hope we will not be at the mercy of others. Maybe you, I said. I still have my brother and I'm not planning to die here. No village will be taking advantage of Kumo. On the other hand, I heard you may have lost your Baijuu. Aniki frowned deeply. This left a bitter taste in his health. It had been a blunder to engage in this war. He shouldn't have made the decision and he was going to leave Iwa in a worse position. If he had both his arms, he would surely try to get rid of Tsunade the second she let her guard down. His jutsu was fast enough. But his circumstances forced him into diplomacy. Both Kage were put on alarm when they felt a heavy presence. They switched behind to see Naruto walking toward them. As the sun set, his mere presence seemed to give it more light. Each slow step felt like a giant leap. It wasn't just his chakra visible, but a venomous killing intent. Despite being experienced, Aniki felt its coldness grip his heart. The killing intent was like a screech of death. Considering how many Naruto has killed, Aniki felt it was fitting. Raikage-sama. Daru called out, rushing toward his leader with a panicked expression. I glanced at the man and then toward his left flank. A handful of men had stayed behind with the Tsuchikage. He only had Daru. Really, he was glad he'd sent B away. He just hoped his brother didn't sense any battle and come back here. We're killing him, I said to the Tsuchikage. It should even things out. I was going to demand his death for both our villages to cooperate with peace, Aniki added without any shame whatsoever. Naruto stopped a couple of feet away from the cage and then stopped leaking his killing intent. He slammed his right foot into the ground and a small boulder sprouted from the belly of the ground. He leapt onto it, sitting casually with his right knee raised, right arm resting on the knee. He watched the cage with an expressionless mask. Things may not have gone the way he wanted, but he wasn't going to complain. Tsunade would soon enough. The armies of both men were still in good distance. He could kill time and allow them to move away because if they came, he was just going to massacre them. Some show, Aniki said with a sneer, his form composed despite how he looked. Looking to see if you can frighten a cage? He spat with contempt. Some brat. Naruto simply put on an amused smile. From where I'm standing, you're the one who looks like a brat, Tsuchikage-sama. The casualness in his voice rubbed Aniki the wrong way. He was certain the blonde came here to fight. But why was he so relaxed? Did he want to talk or just stall until his Hokage arrived? It is good you came here before Tsunade. We can get rid of you, I shouted with anger. Naruto's eyes turned to the Raikage without any contempt. I came here for the same thought as well. To kill you before she arrives. She is too kind and will discuss a conclusion with you in a peaceful manner, that is if you two don't try to take her out. He glanced up into the sky. This shall be the last sunset you see. Enjoy it while it lasts. Arrogant little prick. Your father wasn't this arrogant in battle. Naruto shrugged with indifference. I'm not my father, he said. Daru-san. Once I finish talking, you should depart from here. I want you to listen so you can see a little of my thinking. After all, if you die here, who will become Raikage? It is rather foolish of you to keep him here, Sama. I felt it insulting that Naruto had the audacity to call him respectfully while suggesting he was a fool. He was going to murder the blonde for the many Kumo shinobi he has killed. Being rash at the moment wasn't going to cut it. He recognized the danger that was in the blonde. What happened to Yugito? I demanded from Naruto. Dead, Naruto said with sadness. I wanted to preserve her life but she refused to follow me. Some people are truly loyal to a fault despite how they are treated, he added with a shake of his head. And mine? Naruto faced Aniki with a smile. I have killed both your Jinchuriki, he said with happiness. And then sealed the two within me. That can't be possible, Aniki shouted. That would mean he had 3 Baijuo inside of him. No, if B did the same with Kumo's Jinchuriki, it would mean he housed 4 of them. Naruto wanted to laugh but he did not. Don't be hysterical, Tsuchikage-sama, he said holding out both his hands. Sun creates lava and Kokuo creates steam. I will display these powers to you shortly, but we must first speak. Maybe, I'll decide I'm the one who needs to die and not you. If you have both my Baijuo, there is more reason you should die. I agree, A said, preparing himself for battle. Naruto sighed. Tsuchikage-sama, you have a history of invading your neighbors. You made a decision for war. Despite being aged and experienced, you chose this path. What have you gained from it? It has just been pain and suffering for your shinobi. It is war, regardless of the winner, both suffer lose something. It is something you should know. I do what I think is best for the village. If Iwa is threatened, I will act. Naruto turned his eyes to the Raikage. Your greed for power knows no bounds. Perhaps it is engraved in Kumo. The Hyuga affair was your doing. You attempted to capture a little girl for the Byakugan and when you failed, you threatened war, denying liability. Konoha had to cave in. Again, during the invasion, you made such a move. It is clear to me that your love for power needs to be tamed. He turned to Daru. They don't seem to be willing to talk much. But you've heard what I said. If you leave here, you can go and make better choices for Kumagakure. Why would you let me leave? Daru asked in a curious tone. Because my aim is not purely death and destruction. I seek a better shinobi world. If you engaged, I cannot guarantee your safety, Naruto said in a measured tone. Tsuchikage, by my grace, I permitted your granddaughter to live. It is still within my power to eliminate her. But, I want to give Iwa a chance. I hope. Enough, I shouted, his body exploding into lightning. His lightning cloak covered his body and he shot toward Naruto in a blur. Boom. The Raikage flashed in front of Naruto, his right fist hooking toward his chest in blinding speed. The punch slammed into Naruto's chest with the full weight, sending him flying backwards. The boulder was crushed under the weight, turning into debris. I didn't let up. As Naruto was being carried by the momentum of his jutsu, he blurred above the blonde, hands held together and slammed them into Naruto. Naruto crashed into the ground in a loud boom. He was buried along the debris. I landed beside him, staring down at him. Naruto simply shifted his eyes toward the Raikage and held out his right hand. Impressive speed. Your attacks also pack quite the punch. You broke a bone or two, he said. A was pissed off and then lifted his right foot. He tried to stomp Naruto as he lay on the ground, but the blonde rolled away before leaping into the air. He disappeared in a blur and appeared in front of Iwa's shinobi. The 100 or so looked terrified at his presence. Go home to your families, Naruto said in a cold tone. If I turn back and see you, your bodies will surely melt. The men trembled. Naruto released a chilling amount of killing intent. They couldn't even move a muscle as he spoke. His very words were spoken with unimaginable power and compelled their bodies. It was out of sheer willpower that they did not turn back and run to their families. Leave, Aniki shouted. Naruto then took a huge leap backwards, and landed a good distance away from the cage. I should begin to attack, he said, placing both hands on the ground. He released an incredible amount of chakra. It wasn't his chakra but that of Sun. The ground suddenly began to tremble slightly. Heat began to increase to the point of making everyone sweat. And then suddenly, lava began to explode from the ground. It spewed put into the atmosphere while the area, amounting to be the size of a football field, was boiling with lava. There were patches of the earth that were not bubbling with lava. Daru wasn't going to abandon the Raikage, but this situation, it seemed Naruto was just proving that he indeed did have Iwa's Jinchuriki. Still, Naruto didn't seem like he was in a hurry to attack. Seeing this, Daru went through hand seals and held out his right hand. Ranten, Reizasakasu. A halo of lightning formed around his outstretched hand. Multiple beams of energy shot toward Naruto in a flash. Naruto clapped his hands seeing the beams shot out to him. The lava in the ground rose, creating a wall in front of him. Some the beams collided with the wall, sending balls of lava flying around. Some beams turned corner, avoiding the wall. Naruto looked up, seeing the beams come to him in from above and the sides. Boom! A loud explosion rocked the area as the beams seemingly hit him. Daru and A were forced to jump into the air when waves of lava burst from the ground and rushed toward them. Anaki was safe in the air, but his safety only lasted a couple of seconds when Naruto suddenly flashed in front of him. He attempted to deliver a roundhouse kick. The kick did connect with the Tsuchikage, but it felt as if Naruto had hit a ton of bricks. His attack didn't move the Tsuchikage. Anaki stretched out his remaining hand, grabbing Naruto's foot. But the second he dragged it, it was quickly surrounded by scales, making it impossible for him to crush the blonde. I see, you hardened your body. Anaki's eyes went wide when Naruto's stretched hand glowed where there were marks. His eyes shot toward the raikage, wondering why the man didn't attack. He smiled bitterly, realizing the man was using him to make Naruto busy so he could attack. That he could die didn't matter to the man, as long as he got an advantage. A black beam shot from Naruto's arm, shooting through Anaki. The beam pierced through his chest. Lariat. Collided with Naruto in a burst of lightning. The attack was so fast Naruto didn't even blink before he was hit on his torso. The raikage dragged them away from the field of lava. The attack sent Naruto crashing into the ground, burying him in a crater. A landed a distance away. When Naruto got up, looking unharmed, I didn't dwell on his shock, he simply shot toward the blonde once more. Lariat. He made the connection, and this time around, he saw blood. The second Naruto was on the ground, he flashed above him, ripping away a powerful right fist filled with lightning. Boom! The second his fist collided with Naruto's chest, there was an explosion. Lightning coursed through Naruto's body while he was further buried into the ground. He coughed out a mouthful of blood when the attack landed, his body feeling numb for a second. I quickly leapt away. Do you want to die? Kurama asked him with impatience. Naruto just shook his head. His chest was split open, his rib cage broken, his lungs visible. Blood was gushing out uncontrollably. His breathing became labored. Even so, he managed to stagger into his feet, as Kurama's chakra bubbled around his body. Something miraculous happened before A's very eyes. The large gap on Naruto's chest just healed. It was an insane level of regeneration that shouldn't be possible. Seeing this, he quickly turned to Daru. Leave. Now. This is an order, he shouted furiously. Daru hesitated for a second before he bowed one last time before the raikage and leapt away from the battlefield. It was obvious, to both him and A, that Naruto wouldn't be killed that easily. Maybe if B was around, they would have a chance. No, they definitely had a greater chance of complete victory. But now, that Tsuchikage was already dead. Naruto received 2 lariats and was still standing. He had yet to really attack. The situation wasn't pleasant. And so, Daru has no other choice to listen. Naruto didn't bother with Daru. He just focused on A with a smile. You protected yourself on the first attack, A said to Naruto. Normal people tremble at the turn of such events. I took a blow that would kill just about anyone, not once but twice. Once, A said with a sneer. I host the Sanbi. It has an impressive defensive capacity. I'd already activated its power before you attacked. But right now, I just wanted to show you that your best is not enough to kill me, Naruto said before holding his hands together as he undid a clone that was gathering natural energy for him. Kurama chakra bubbled around him as well, creating a cloak of energy. Here I come. I wanted to ask if the display of power would be enough to break him, but Naruto suddenly disappeared in an orange flash. His movement was so fast, I thought he'd seen the yellow flash. The blonde flashed behind him. Seeing no attack coming, I twisted around, his foot in air, aiming at Naruto's temple. But Naruto remarkably ducked under the strike. It seemed purely on instinct. The blonde took a single step forward, while trying to punch him on the gut. A was fast, and tried to leap away. But while the punch didn't collide with him, a powerful force hit him on the chest with devastating effect. The blow sent him flying away, while he forgot to breathe for a second. His chest burnt slightly. A flip several times before landing on the ground. The second he touched down, Naruto came crashing down at him. A blurred away, avoiding the attack. Naruto crashed onto the ground, both feet getting buried. He appeared behind Naruto in mid-air, his right foot cutting through the air with all the power and speed he could manage. Still, to his utter complete shock, Naruto ducked under the kick. It shouldn't be possible given the proximity, but he still dodged the attack. Naruto twisted around, and then landed a brutal punch on A's chest once more. The raikage felt the same heat as before, but this time, it was intense. There was even a sickening sound of his bones cracking. The pain from the blow shot through his entire body, making him stiff. He couldn't even regain control of his body until he landed on the ground on both knees. He spat out blood and frowned deeply. "Impressive, isn't it?" Naruto asked pleasantly. "I was using frog kata, coupled with the sheer strength of the four tails. At the moment, I'm faster than you. So, it makes dodging your attacks very possible." He started walking toward the Raikage. "We should end this, Raikage-sama. I wanted to show you the mercy of dying with content knowing you tried everything and it still didn't work." The following morning. The sun had yet to set. Coldness gripped the air. There were no tremors on the ground as shinobi and jutsu collided with it. Birds didn't fill their sky domain as they fled from the surface due to bloody battles. There was just silence. Dark clouds threatened to rain down. The silence wasn't peace before storm. The sound channels would soon be filled with waves of weeping and cries of vengeance. The end of a bloody war was like that. Tsunade stared at the scorched surface with a sad look on her face. Anaki's corpse was laid on her right. A huge hole on his chest. The Raikage looked to have been beat to a pulp. They were both dead, but the latter appeared to have suffered greatly. It was the end of a war. Who won? Did Konoha win? Tsunade didn't feel like a winner. Shizune was gone. Her beloved was gone from this world. And it was a plot by Anaki. Konoha always took things from her. It seemed, this wasn't going to end. Eventually, it would take her life as well. But, had Shizune suffered? Did she blame her for her death? If she didn't have Shizune disguised, she may have lived. They would have been returning to Konoha to heal their wounds. Who could have done this? Someone in her company asked, looking at the bodies of the Raikage and Tsuchikage. Does it matter? They are dead and this war is over. Isn't it obvious who did it? Jiraiya was looking around the field. There's signs of lava which made it difficult to tell. But according to the toads, Naruto was very much alive. Jiraiya couldn't think there would be anyone else who would do this aside from Naruto. The deaths of the cage complicated matters, but it meant the end of the war. No more needless bloodshed. He couldn't even think why they were even fighting. It seemed, peace was an impossibility in this world. He smiled, he wouldn't want Nagato to hear his thoughts. Otherwise, he would say he was in the right path. But maybe, Naruto has found a way. Naruto? Tsunade asked grimly. Can only be him, Jiraiya said confidently. Of course, we have to track him down. But, that will be for later. Tsunade nodded in agreement. But she was hoping, when she got home, he would be waiting for them. The second she was told he had gone off-grid, she was worried. Seal the bodies. We will send them to their villages, Tsunade said, turning away from the battlefield. Let's go home. It seems, we have reached an end to this war. The men roared. But Tsunade had nothing to roar about. She felt empty inside. She didn't even think he could continue with being Hokage. No, she couldn't do this anymore. She'd given everything she could possibly give for Konoha. And this was her last run. Chapter 15. For reasons known and unknown, they had always fought. Violence had always been the language men understood. Winners and losers. It was their world. Blood and death. Peace was a fantasy dreamed up by those who'd grown tired of the constant battles, losing the ones they loved. For years, Naruto had delved deep into the pits of the unknown, deep into territories men dared not venture and never returned. Guren often said it was a miracle that with all his power, he'd managed to return from the abyss with a sober mind. Often, people in his position and power became corrupted. But that was just in her world of scum and villains. Naruto placed the palm of his right hand on the trunk of a tree and pushed with frustration. It may have seemed like he was trying to move a mountain, but his simple movement caused the tree to fall before him. The weight of its branches forced it to fall, but it was caught by other trees. He shook his head and watched the tree with an expressionless mask before placing both hands in his pockets. As he turned around, he faced a cold-looking Sasuke. He said with a smile, "You still have eyes. Thought you'd be blind by now." It was the first time he had seen the Uchiha in 3 years. After the war, he had vanished along with the dead. There had been a massive hunt by Kurotsuchi. He had found it amusing as Iwagakure shinobi turned stones upside down looking for him. She had even dared to bark at Konoha. A desperate dog backed into a corner. But she had hushed and focused on keeping her village from sinking. Sasuke snarled. "You'd be happy." "Why? You're just Sasuke Uchiha. You mean nothing and are not an obstacle to me. It would just be a pity that the great Uchiha clan would die out," he said, and then lifted his right foot. It moved in a blink, kicking into the tree he'd pushed earlier. His foot broke the trunk in half, causing both halves to fall over. As the tree fell, leaves fluttered down alongside it, birds chirping as they flew into the air. It was a beautiful melody. The beauty of nature, which could not be replaced by any human, no matter how enchanting her voice might become. He sat down on the broken trunk and faced his once good friend, who was glaring at him. So? You're still an idiot. You're over 20, Sasuke. Don't you have anything better to say? Naruto asked, chuckling. His laughter seemed to annoy Sasuke. How did you find me anyway? I have my methods. Sure. Funny. You're the one who is following me. The world is a cold place when you have no one to rely on, isn't it? You and I have always been able to understand this much. Alas, the hatred in your heart will not be subservient to anything else. For the better part of the past few years, Sasuke had been searching for him. Naruto knew why. He simply hadn't cared enough to be bothered by it. He had his reasons for staying put. Sasuke could have gone to Konoha to exact his vengeance, but he didn't. Instead, he wandered the shinobi world aimlessly. Sasuke glared coldly and then walked over to a tree, leaning against it with his hands folded across his chest. Why haven't you returned to Konoha? I asked the same question. Are you intentionally trying to make me angry? I'm succeeding, it seems. Sasuke glared at him. Sakura misses you, he said with a smile. I'm sure she hasn't moved on with her life and still hopes for the day the love of her life will return to her embrace, he laughed. Love is hopeless, isn't it? Answer my question. Still bossy, Naruto sighed. Learn to relax a bit. Do you know how many I've killed? How many I killed during the war? I used to think about it daily. It haunted me. I was naive and stupid, but then I became a killer, just like every other shinobi does. I wanted to achieve something bigger. I simply wanted to be known throughout the world. That's why I killed as many people as I did. It was for ideals. Ideals I have since learned are nonsensical. But, a better world with rules is likely possible. To answer your question, Sasuke, I haven't returned to Konoha yet because I needed time to consider whether going back was the right thing to do. I wasn't sure if I wanted to return, and I felt like I needed some time to observe the shinobi world. Sasuke remained silent for a moment. Naruto wasn't being hostile towards him, which was good. Sasuke wanted a friend, or at least someone to talk to, but his pride wouldn't allow him to admit it. What do you plan on doing? Changing the shinobi world, of course. While hiding? You've come far and haven't restored your clan. I remember very clearly that was your stated goal. Restoring my clan means nothing in this kind of world. The shinobi world has been at peace. There is a great imbalance of power at the moment. And Iwagakure is the village that suffered the most during the war. Its feudal lord has been reckless, and the new Tsuchikage seems erratic. It is only a matter of time before she angers one of the great peers, Sasuke stated in a stern voice. Besides, feudal lords hold a lot of power. It is only a matter of time before they go back to their shenanigans and bring shinobi to war again. Naruto clapped his hands, earning another dagger from Sasuke. You've truly grown if you're able to look at the bigger picture. Miracles truly do happen in life. The miracle is that you're actually becoming smart, Sasuke shot back. You're still single, aren't you? Naruto asked, and then stared. Unpleasant as it may be to recall, don't tell me your only kiss was with me. When Sasuke only glared, he laughed. Yugito, come and save another child, he called out. Yugito jumped out of the trees and landed beside Naruto. She was not amused. Naruto had often made advances towards her, all of which she rejected. He hadn't killed her. But for some reason, he kept her alive. He said it was out of mercy but refused to allow her to return home. Traveling with him hadn't been as horrible as she'd thought. He was actually pleasant and helpful, he even assisted her in training. She learned to understand him through their many interactions. Smiling and pleasant, he could turn cold and ruthless in an instant. The warmth he'd been radiating seemed like an illusion. Sasuke said in surprise, I thought she was dead. Naruto sighed. I've killed other Jinchuriki. But I made an exception with her, he said. There was just no point really. It would have been pure greed to kill her. Iwagakure will not be pleased to hear about this. Naruto grinned. Well, what can they do about it? He asked. You're no longer as much of an idiot as you used to be. You're still the same. I thought Danzo would have changed you. Sasuke scoffed. As if he had the means. Nobody can change me. I make my own decisions. Of course, Naruto said. But you're right. The cage haven't even settled anything because of Iwa's refusal to meet with others unless their Baijuu are returned. Feudal lords care little for the lives of shinobi. They pour in money and we dance to their tune. They hold power, and shinobi villages depend on them. We may not think of it that way, but shinobi villages are always their feudal lord's private army. We're not some independent nations we like to think of ourselves as. It's truly amazing that despite the power we shinobi possess, we are still controlled by feudal lords. However, that isn't necessarily the root of all our problems. The real issue is that there is no order. Everyone does as they please, for the sake of their villages. There are no rules that govern how shinobi villages operate. There are no consequences for erratic nations. So that's why you've been sending Guren to the feudal lords, Yugito said in thought. She had never been told the agenda, but she knew there was something Naruto was planning. Where does Konoha fit into all of this? What did you hope to achieve by coming here, Sasuke? Naruto's smile had faded, and his expression now mirrored the steel in his voice. Are we still friends? She asked. That's an odd question. Is it? Yes, we haven't been friends for a while, Sasuke. Sasuke seemed shocked by Naruto's response. His pride would still not allow him to ask if they could be friends. Without power, you cannot accomplish anything. I want us to work together to change the shinobi world. Perhaps then, we can restore our clans. But I'm afraid, even if we restore our clans, the tragedies will continue to occur. Indeed, without power you can do nothing. Despite my fame, it seems I cannot do everything. That is why I need Konoha, Naruto said and then raised his index finger. He then wagged it in front of his face. He released a terrifying amount of chakra that shattered the trunk he was sitting on, sending a pulse of shockwave toward both Yugito and Sasuke. The Uchiha dropped his hands beside his body, and thought about taking a step back, but he planted himself firmly against the tree. The wave lasted for a couple of seconds. What makes you think I need you? You've always relied on someone else. You've always relied on the power of the Kyuubi. I thought you would understand that. Clever, Naruto said. But perhaps that's what defines the strength of the Senju. The Uchiha have individual talents, but the Senju always work together to become stronger. I use borrowed powers. There's no shame in admitting that. I'm a shinobi after all. You're better equipped to fight alone. I must rely on others to stand a chance. You're blessed, I am not. That is life, and I accept it. You can stand proud of your hard-earned powers. No shame in that. But, I've also worked hard to harness the power I possess. Naruto raised his index finger again. But, that, Sasuke, was simply my own chakra. You can say I have more chakra because I am a Jinchuriki, but the truth is, I have more chakra because I am Uzumaki. Sasuke knew that. It was another thing he and Naruto had in common, both of their respective clans had been wiped out. When are you going back to Konoha? I don't know. I have to first see Wagakure. I want to deal with Kurotsuchi before I go back, Naruto said. Have you encountered pain? He asked curiously. They tried to recruit me into their organization, Sasuke said. You've killed almost all of their members. Have you encountered any of them that remain? A couple of times, he said with a shake of his head. Sad people. Naruto then faced Yugito. You're free to return to Kumagakure. Send my regards to the Raikage, and I hope you'll send in a good word about me. Just like that? Yugito asked with disbelief. Yes. Don't you want to go back? You're not going to force me to return? Do you have any thoughts on this matter? Yugito didn't reply. She actually fled the scene before Naruto could change his mind. She had missed her beloved home and wanted to return as soon as possible. That's generous of you. Kumagakure will still have its Jinchuriki. While you've not shown the same mercy to Iwagakure. Favoritism. Naruto shrugged. Besides, one of them killed Shizune. I liked her, she was a good person, he said in a saddened tone. But there's nothing generous about sending her back. This just makes it easier for me to enter the cloud. When I speak, they'll be more open to listening. The same can't be said about Iwagakure. I wonder if I should even return there by Juu. We'll see. You're using people now, Sasuke said. What are you going to do in Iwagakure? Naruto got up from the ground. He took slow steps towards Sasuke. The Uchiha watched him with impatience. He looked as if he was ready to drag him to their destination, just so he could get his response. Naruto stopped beside Sasuke and watched him through the corner of his eyes. His expression remained blank, his eyes devoid of any emotion. Naruto said, I need to talk to her about her attitude. If I have to, I'll flatten her. You'll only make them hate you. This makes working with them more difficult, if not impossible. They already hate me. I'm the reason they lost the war and many of their shinobi. Like father like son, it seems. Naruto turned slightly, giving Sasuke a look. If they can't be reasoned with, I can just wipe out Iwagakure. I didn't expect those words to come from you. Naruto laughed. I'm just messing with you, he said with a wave of his right hand and then took 3 steps away from Sasuke before halting. You're free to do as you like. I do not require your approval. Sure, Naruto said, rolling his eyes. Will you be returning to Konoha? If you do so. What is your opinion on pain? There could be a danger. I see, Naruto said. Well, I'll see you in Konoha then. Konohagakure. The Hokage was the absolute authority in the village. Even mundane affairs were handled by him. The chokehold on all affairs was suffocating, to the Hokage. Everyone was free to simply just listen and do as they were told. Nobody questioned, aside from the occasional side glances. Kakashi couldn't figure out how the Sandaime Hokage had managed to hold the reins for so long. For 3 years since the Fourth War, Kakashi had simply floated just above the surface, never drowned, yet never able to fly. For some reason, he was content with it. He was, after all, giving it his all, just not to drown. It was no wonder, after the war, Tsunade returned to the village and announced her retirement. The village had stood still. She didn't even care who her successor was, the only thing she cared about was her retirement. The village council scrambled to find her replacement. At that moment, Kakashi had volunteered to go look for his students, but the request was rejected, and he was chained to the Hokage office. Even today, he missed his contests with Guy. A stroll down the streets to the memorial stones with his beloved book felt like a luxurious journey. We should be more careful dealing with Iwagakure. Their Tsuchikage is a child, but still naive, and her demands have been ridiculous, Koharu said, her aged voice reverberating with wisdom. Kakashi inwardly sighed. He wished he could sleep, even if it were just for a couple of days. There was no rest. There was no time for anything. Being Hokage was a full-time job. There was never a moment when Kakashi was simply Kakashi, he was always the Rakudaime Hokage. In the war room, they discussed relationships with other great nations. Ever since the war ended, each village had a new kage. The former was quiet, focused on rebuilding. Kiri and Suna, who didn't get involved, had better relations with the Leaf. In the room, Shikamaru, the Anbu commander, Koharu, and Homura sat around the rectangular table. Jiraiya was probably back in the village. Tsunade had gone back to just drinking and running the hospital. She no longer bothered to train anyone. Losing Shizune had been a death blow to her. However, she was managing. She just wasn't doing much to help run the village anymore. Kurotsuchi was demanding that Iwa's Jinchuriki be returned. Kakashi couldn't return something he didn't have. For the past few years, she had refused to meet unless there was a guarantee that her Baijuu would be returned. But there was no sign of Naruto. The blonde had vanished since the war and nobody had heard from him. Jiraiya said the toads said he was very much alive. Sasuke too had left Konoha, but he was occasionally seen. Well, we can't give her what she demands, the Anbu commander said. They lost the war. She must deal with it. Her demands are unreasonable. We don't even know if Naruto really took them or just killed them. Getting Naruto should be our top priority right now, Homura added. Without him, we can't end things. What if they demand his head for the sake of peace? We have to admit, Naruto has shown enough power to destroy a hidden village without even using the power of the Kyuubi. Given their losses, the others will feel threatened. Shikaku asked, but isn't it just Iwagakure that is making things difficult? The other 3 aren't causing any trouble. And we can't talk about Naruto when we don't know where he is, the Anbu commander added. Konoha isn't in any danger at the moment and the thing with Iwa doesn't pose an immediate threat, but it won't just go away, Kakashi said mildly, dreading the thought of being put into a situation where he would have to defend his actions. After the war, it had been a thankless task, cleaning up, holding mass memorials. Even now, some people walked around with dark clouds over their heads. There have just been too many tragedies for those born in the Leaf. Other nations could contend with the occasional wars, but the Leaf had to deal with the Kyuubi's rampages, the Sound Invasion. The Kyuubi's rampage remained one of the darkest moments for this village. Kakashi was nonetheless grateful that they hadn't suffered as much others during the war. The likes of Taki and Kuza had suffered massively because of Iwagakure. An unprovoked attack and they still had to work around it because even to this day, both villages wanted payment for their losses from Iwagakure. and that Tsuchikage dared them to attack if they wanted their money back. The only thing that remains a danger to the village is Amigakure. We've still not done anything about its leader. He's powerful enough that he nearly killed Jiraiya-sama. But they haven't made any waves since the war. Doesn't mean the problem will go away, Kakashi said. What are we going to do about Sasuke? He must be made to pay for killing Danzo, Koharu said firmly, contempt written all over her face. Kakashi rolled his eyes at what he viewed as theatrics. Even after he was dead, the two elders still remained loyal. They wanted to know what had happened to Danzo and wanted whoever killed him to be charged with treason. It was a fact that Sasuke was with Danzo when he died, but there was nothing to suggest Sasuke had turned on Danzo. His disappearance remained suspect. There was also the question of his battle with Itachi, someone they'd considered dead but who turned out to be very much alive. We don't know what happened, Kakashi said. I won't deny he knows something, but he isn't the biggest threat to Konoha. He couldn't even imagine Sasuke turning on the village. He now wields the Mangekyo Sharingan. There are no resources to go after him. Aren't you just saying that because he was once your student? Who should we send after him? Kakashi asked. Koharu didn't reply. And Naruto? She said. We cannot forget he holds the most power. Naruto has earned the right to be away for a bit. Kakashi said that just to save face. No one had the right to turn away from the village. It was nevertheless undeniable that Naruto was the hero of the war. Without him, Konoha would have suffered greatly and things might not have turned out in their favor. The most important thing is that Konoha is now stable. We have good trade relations with both Sunagakure and Kirigakure. Our relationship with the former has only strengthened. It is now a matter of whether we can form a healthy relationship with Kumagakure. Just because they lost their raikage doesn't mean we can forget all the pain and injustice they inflicted on us. Shikaku shook his head. The elders wouldn't let go of the past, but he could see their point. Kumagakure had been stifled by its power for far too long. The current raikage seemed like a reasonable man, but things couldn't be said to have changed. Some people wouldn't move without an acknowledgement of wrongdoing. If we're going to demand an acknowledgement, we must be prepared to give it as well. Shikaku received a glare from Koharu. We shouldn't admit to anything. Others should, but we shouldn't be in a position of power. Kakashi nodded his head, agreeing with Shikaku. We're trying to move towards peace. We can't be bullying others. I support Shikaku's approach. Peace? Don't be naive. You should already know that peace in the shinobi world is just a dream. We always believe that this war will be the last one. But the last war proved that anything is possible. Shinobi will fight over anything. I don't disagree with that. The situation with Iwagakure could lead to another war if not handled properly. They do not forget, the Anbu commander added. Bully them, and they'll be plotting to regain their power and lead us into another war. The purpose of the proposed Cage Summit is to foster a way forward. The Mizukage at first suggested calling for the summit 3 months after the war. However, Kumagakure had declined due to internal problems. Iwa's response wasn't received. A year later, the Mizukage wrote again to Kumo expressing their willingness, as long as there was a clear agenda on the table. Iwagakure was the only village that refused to attend. Due to this refusal, the summit never took place. The 6th Hokage opened his mouth to speak again. We must decide our policy on how we deal with Kumagakure and Iwa. That decision will influence future generations and could influence whether we go to war with them or not. Indeed, Shikaku agreed. But perhaps the Mizukage had been far ahead of them. She had not given up and had been pressing for a Cage Summit. Ambition brings determination, Koharu grunted. I do worry for Konoha's future. Who in this generation can take over from Kakashi? She asked with concern. Naruto. He might be dead for all we know. Jiraiya-sama said. Koharu interjected. It doesn't matter what Jiraiya says. The fact is Naruto is not here and he has simply disappeared. She is right, the Anbu commander said. But I don't think that is something we should worry about, at least for now. We have to solve Iwagakure's situation and find a way to bring her to the Cage Summit. Without that summit, we will never know the true state of things. Should we use our power to compel her? We should have done that a long time ago, Koharu said. Iwagakure is too weak to resist anything. With friends like Koharu, what could possibly go wrong? Iwagakure. Kurotsuchi didn't hide her delight at seeing a missing person at her gate. She threw the papers and shoved everyone out of the way in her haste to meet this worm. Nice of you to finally dig yourself out of your hole, she hissed. For 3 long years, her men turned over every rock they could find, searching for him. They returned empty-handed. The bounty on his head increased with each passing month. The Earth Lord's impatience with her grew to the size of his belly. Her own frustration kept her awake at nights. Her grandfather had been murdered, Iwagakure had lost the war and both of its Jinchuriki. It was hell her grandfather left her with. But to hell she went. As the victors, Konoha made things much easier for Kurotsuchi. She thought they were being mightily merciful. But then again, Naruto had disappeared with one of their Jinchuriki. Maybe he hadn't even disappeared and Konoha could simply ignore them since they no longer possessed any power. The pleasure is indeed mine, Kurotsuchi, Naruto replied with a warm smile, amused by something. His amusement wiped the smile off Kurotsuchi's face. That's Tsuchikage-sama. Oh? Naruto offered a mocking bow. My apologies. Though it is by design, it still feels unreal that the little girl I let live has turned out so. He paused, thinking. Foolish. The word came out with a small shockwave. Dust picked up, and the shinobi took their positions, ready for an assault and to protect their cage. Have you come here to offer your head? Naruto's smile disappeared. The air grew thick. He took a single step and then he was gone, swept away by gusts of wind. None of the group members noticed his movements, they all stood motionless, their eyes wide with shock and surprise. Kurotsuchi was the first to notice his presence behind her. He had taken a single step and zipped past them with invisibility. He was now walking casually, hands on his back. He was striding confidently towards her village as if he owned the place. She shouted in anger and frustration, "Kill him!" It all happened in a blur, as fast as lightning, with the loudness of a thunderstorm. And the precision of a double-edged sword. She'd stood there, wide-eyed, while her men, one by one, piled up in front of Naruto. Meanwhile, the villagers behind them were in chaos. The uproar caused panic across the streets. It spread like a wildfire. Hundreds of shinobi rushed to the scene. She too would have been overwhelmed by their numbers if she hadn't stopped them. The only saving grace was that Naruto hadn't killed anyone. They were broken, but not dead. Frustratingly, he had swatted them away like flies, all the while keeping his eyes on her, daring her to come and humiliate herself in front of her entire village. She refused the invitation even though it was mouthwatering. She dared not accept. Naruto settled on the bodies he'd piled up, a knee raised, his glare fixed on Kurotsuchi. The Tsuchikage got a good look at him. Not much had changed in his appearance. His hair had just grown longer. I was hoping to speak to you privately, but since you're acting this way, we'll discuss it here, he said in a cold voice. I really should have just wiped out this village. Or perhaps I should reduce you to a small nation. That would make things easier. You stand on Iwa's grounds and threaten us like that? Kurotsuchi took a couple of steps forward. You may be strong, but you can't possibly think you can defeat this whole village. Do you think we've been sitting idle over the past years? We've been waiting for you. The past few years had filled her with depression. The only thing that kept the tank from overflowing was the hope that she would eventually get what belonged to her and Iwagakure would be at peace. Naruto said to Kurama, I made a mistake. He continued, I should have killed her. She's just like her grandfather. I thought she would grow from it, but it didn't. It's not too late. Naruto chuckled. I'd ruin everything with a single move. Even my allies would turn against me. At this rate, he didn't want to become the enemy of the shinobi world. If he wanted, he could go that path, but life was worth more following a civil path. Kurotsuchi did tempt him nonetheless. So? Have a heart for humans, will you? Naruto asked the Kyuubi. Nothing ever goes as planned. If you've been waiting for me, please tell me what you need. Kurotsuchi released a burst of killing intent and anger, but there was really nothing else she could do that wouldn't leave Iwagakure in a far worse state. She could attack and order her men to support her. Maybe they would kill him or maybe it would be humiliating. Whatever, she had to decide on something that would safeguard her village's reputation. The frustration over her inability to do anything caused her to grind her teeth so much that she bled. To add an insult, Naruto seemed amused. You must really hate me. This situation doesn't even make things easy, Naruto said. But you show good judgment in not ordering your men to attack. I applaud you for this. Kurotsuchi hissed. Don't patronize me, she spat. We won our Baijuu. And you owe us one for killing my grandfather. But if he returned Iwa's Baijuu, she would grudgingly allow him to leave, until they had regained their power, enough to challenge the leaf. A dangerous person like him could not possibly be allowed to live on. He was a danger to all armies. Do you have the authority to make such demands? Are you making fun of me? It's a fair question, Naruto said casually. Your grandfather tried to have Konoha's Hokage killed, and failed. But he managed to kill her student. What fake outrage is this that you demand compensation for losses in a war, which you started? If you can't take a shot, don't try to fight anyone. Kurotsuchi's murderous glare only intensified. The contempt in her eyes caused the shinobi surrounding them to take a step back in fear of being in her way should she explode. Being in power, you can say that. Of course, said Naruto. Those in power can speak and be listened to. It is not a question of what is right or wrong. This is just how things work in our world. Shinobi live off death and violence. Our techniques are not meant to build but to destroy. Iwagakure was defeated. Konoha emerged victorious. And yet, you remain stubborn, unwilling to cooperate with others. What do you hope to achieve? Do you not see that what you're doing is only causing problems in the shinobi world? As long as Iwagakure is fine. I don't care about any other villages. I am the Tsuchikage. Naruto sighed. Jiraiya wanted peace in this treacherous world. Nagato was ridiculous to think pain could teach these people anything. Iwa had suffered, they were in pain, and yet in their pain, they chose to hate and drive themselves into oblivion. I won't tell you how to do things. Make your own choices. But you've put a large bounty on my head. The Earth Lord is bankrolling it. Tell me, would it be wrong for me to destroy the Earth capital to protect myself? If he did that, it would be disastrous for Iwagakure. Without the feudal lord, the village would suffer. And even if she warned him about this, the feudal lord was likely only to increase the bounty. As long as Naruto is alive, he will always be in danger, and so will Iwa. What do you want? Kurotsuchi demanded. You really are trying to make me look like a bad person, Naruto said with a sigh. He then jumped down and started to walk towards Kurotsuchi. Her shinobi moved but she held them back with a single hand motion. He stopped inches from her and stared deeply into her eyes. Life is fragile, and nothing remains forever. I understand there may be pressure from the Earth Lord, but if you want war with me, I'll give it to you. I came to let you know this. I also wanted to ask why you're resisting moving forward, but seeing you, I have an answer. Kurotsuchi threatened him by saying, I will kill you one day. Naruto smiled. That's a tall order for you. But maybe, I'll allow you to hit me. Kurotsuchi threw an uppercut at him in a fit of anger. Naruto gracefully avoided getting hit and then stared back with cold eyes. You know I kept you alive, right? I could have killed you in the war. Kurotsuchi sneered. Your mistake. Yes, indeed, he said. But I had thought of the village. I thought if your grandfather and father died, Iwagakure would be left poor. My aim was not to see it suffer. But if you continue this way. He leaned closer to her. I will correct my error. I dare you to do that now. Was she doing this because she didn't take him seriously? If he humiliated her now, she would have no other option but to increase her efforts to have him killed. He sighed. Why was he even keeping her alive? It was just better to destroy this village and be done with it. Would Konoha accept him if he did so? No, he would become the greatest threat in the shinobi world. Perhaps he did this to preserve his humanity. Or perhaps it was a reminder to himself that some people cannot be changed. Don't have the balls. A fist collided with her right cheek with brutal force, dislocating her jaw. The punch sent her flying toward the shinobi like a bullet. Remarkably, Naruto still managed to rush towards her and grab her by her foot before her man could catch her. He then disappeared into thin air after grabbing her. Where is he? That way. One of the shinobi shouted, pointing toward the Tsuchikage tower. When they arrived at the tower, they found Kurotsuchi sitting on the rooftop, an expressionless mask with blood smeared across her mouth. Someone shouted, get a medic. Week later. This really happened? Kakashi asked with an expressionless mask, his tone a bit fearful. Sitting in front of the Hokage's desk, Jiraiya nodded. Iwagakure is keeping it under wraps, but it is only a matter of time before they send us a message and the news spreads across the shinobi world. The news of Naruto's confrontation with Iwagakure had reached them. Fear of the repercussions aside, Kakashi was joyful that there was finally a sighting of their hero. It meant he was well and truly alive. I wonder what he might have hoped to achieve? I wonder about that as well. But I've come back because I think he too will be returning soon. He can't make an appearance and not return home, Jiraiya said confidently. Are we certain he'll return home? There was an undeniable truth that Naruto had been scheming both before and during the war. They could never figure it out. He hadn't disappeared alone, he'd gone with Guren and Yukimaru. He will, perhaps out of denial of any other reason or just confidence in his former student. Jiraiya didn't blink. I'm sure Tsunade-sama will be happy to hear about this. Jiraiya was not a man known for looking grim and gloomy, but when it came to Tsunade's state, he displayed such emotions. Maybe it was the pain caused by his failure to uplift her mood. Yeah, the Sannin replied and then stood up. Even though I was warned against it, I went to Amigakure. I thought they might know about Naruto since he killed some members of the Akatsuki, but they didn't know. And they didn't try to kill you? No. We still can't say they aren't threats. I suppose we will have to engage them on a formal level. When she wasn't doing her job at the hospital, Tsunade was a shell. The once joyous princess was now a grim reincarnation. She sucked the joy out of anyone who so much as glanced at her. The amount of sadness and misery that oozed from her was enough to make a crippled man question if his life was really that bad. Sure, he didn't have legs, and had to depend on others before he could take a leak or even get off the bed, but at least he wasn't as miserable. She'd been like that. The pain and loss just came full circle. She'd now lost everyone she considered family. Both Uzumaki, they could be called family. But Naruto too, had abandoned her, at least that was how it appeared to her. Jiraiya pushed the curtains aside in her room, and the sun immediately poured through. The rays of light hit Tsunade's face, causing her to squint and then roll over onto the other side. It's 11 a.m., Haim. Who asked you? Can you continue like this? I'm trying to sleep, Jiraiya, Tsunade said in a cold tone. Jiraiya sighed and walked over to the queen-sized bed. He sat on the edge and stared at the wooden floor. He admitted, he wished he could join her, embrace her, and even make love to her. But, there was a fine line in their relationship. His love had never been accepted. He'd often wondered how it was possible to love someone this much and not have it returned. The human heart has a funny way of working. His inability to help him made him realize the strength of the walls she put up between them. The distance he hoped to narrow down, she preferred keeping it this way. Naruto would probably blast through with a few words. He could sneak his way through her defenses like no other. Naruto appeared in Iwagakure a week ago. He had a confrontation with the Tsuchikage. I'm guessing he'll be returning anytime soon. If he were hoping for a reaction, Jiraiya didn't get any. He sat there motionless for about an hour. He couldn't figure out what to say. There was nothing new he could say to her. Nothing mischievous he hadn't tried over the years. He'd given up, just accepting the situation with hope that the lights would eventually turn back on. Hokage Monument. Nothing had changed. Not a single thing. There wasn't any progress. The streets remained unchanged. He couldn't spot any new buildings. Konoha was still the same damn village. Naruto felt disappointed. Kiri was drastically changing. At this rate, the mist would venture alone into a new era while the rest remained stuck in the past. Without change, shinobi could not evolve. The same treacherous rules that governed their ancestors would govern them. Humanity was always evolving, and the village had to evolve as well, for the sake of its own growth. Naruto stood at the Hokage monument, looking out over the village. His former playground. He reminisced on the memories of old with bittersweet nostalgia. It didn't take long for a squad of Onbu to surround him. He didn't spare them a glance, they weren't threatening him. Others quickly backed away, and one remained. Perhaps they were trying to ascertain if he was the real deal and not an imposter. It wasn't a fairy tale. Imposters were everywhere, riding on the glories of others to satisfy their own greed. Is he still in the office? Yes. I'll go there. Oddly, there was no excitement within him. Truth be told, he'd never truly missed this village. If not for his dreams, he wouldn't have returned. Home? Naruto didn't think he had won. Perhaps he was simply high on emotions. And soon enough, he'd realize he missed running through the streets, watching the villagers come to the realization that he wasn't as bad as they thought. Hi. The Onbu had disappeared without a trace. Naruto followed him to the Hokage tower, but he didn't pull a magic trick. Instead, he jumped down, landing atop a building before hopping through the rooftops. The office was different. The framed images of the past Hokage were hung on the walls. Kakashi sat behind the desk, a single mountain of documents. There was no lingering smell of tobacco, as it had been when the Sandaime was in charge, or anything broken when Tsunade occupied the office. It was just his former sensei. He's not aged a second. Some women would kill for the formula. Kakashi gave him a sly smile. His body tensed as he debated standing up, or at least Naruto thought so. Hokage-sama. Please call me sensei. Naruto laughed. You really didn't like being a sensei back then. I'd rather take the opportunity than be stuck in this office. That bad? He asked. I can't even read this. You're not missing much. Jiraiya-sensei's latest piece has been a disappointment. You've read it? Kakashi asked excitedly. Don't tell me. I don't want you to spoil it for me. I wasn't going to. Naruto bowed slightly. It is good to see you again, sensei. You look well. Kakashi's smile returned in full force. You've been gone for a while, he said, his voice serious. I'm happy you're back, but there is a lot to talk about. I can imagine. You also owe me an explanation. I can imagine. Kakashi sighed. Please, sit. He motioned towards the chair in front of his desk. I'm really glad you came back, Naruto. I was worried that you might have decided against returning home. We've missed you. Konoha has been waiting patiently for your return. What a difference. Kakashi noticed that Naruto didn't express any excitement. But what did he expect? This wasn't a child anymore. This was a war-hardened shinobi who had killed thousands of men and women. Mind if we go outside and talk? I'd like to have a better view of things. Yes. They climbed to the top of the Hokage Tower. Naruto sat on the edge, dangling his legs over the side, watching the streets below with an expressionless mask. Kakashi sat next to him. Some years ago, I yearned for affection. Anything. To be loved. To be cherished. To have people simply admit that Naruto Uzumaki existed, Naruto said in a bitter tone. He swiped his fingers on his wrist and a small scroll appeared in a puff of smoke. He opened it and then summoned its contents. A huge bottle appeared. Naruto took a sip and then passed the bottle to Kakashi. Everybody wants something. Something that gratifies them. For some, it's the simple life, obeying the village and dying on a mission, he laughed. People are that simple. Kakashi lifted his mask slightly and took a sip of the water. He tried to swallow, but nearly spat it back out. What the hell is this? He said, grimacing at the bitterness. Toads. You're making me drink things meant for toads. They are animals. You're not much of a drinker? Kakashi shook his head. I'm a reader. Naruto chuckled. That you are, sensei, he said with a smile and grabbed the bottle from the man. You returned as a transformed individual after your trip. I just grew up. People grow, you become a different person. Perhaps. You don't have the same dreams you used to have. You stopped talking about becoming Hokage. Despite being a student of Jiraiya-sama, you are nothing like him. I wanted to carve out my own path. They don't hate you anymore, you know? Kakashi said, looking down the street. You're a hero now. Once they know you've returned, it will be a celebration. Without you, Konoha would not have attained victory. I've heard. A younger me would have been thrilled. But it doesn't really change anything. Perhaps for the history books. But, does it change anything for me personally? Sensei, you've always been miserable, even though the village looks up to you. Kakashi's smile completely disappeared. It just cut him in half for Naruto to say he was miserable in such a cold tone. Kakashi replied in a quiet tone after a minute of silence. Some sufferings are not easy to heal from. I know, Naruto said. I know, sensei. He paused for a moment before continuing. I've never truly had anything. I had Sasuke, but he was a miserable son of a bitch. You'd be shocked if you'd met his brother. Itachi. Great guy. Knowledgeable, quiet, and fair. Sounds like the Itachi I knew from Anbu. Not a bad guy. Naruto fell silent, and then opted to explain since it was eventually going to come up. What did Anbu have on me before the war? Flight risk. Tsunade-sama didn't believe it and rejected Anbu's suggestion to keep you under surveillance. Why did you choose to disappear after the war? Kakashi asked with a hint of emotion in his voice. We looked everywhere for you. Tsunade-sama was lost, especially with Shizune gone. I'd only come back to Konoha to help it survive a war. I'll be honest, I'd planned on living my life elsewhere, maybe fulfilling some grand goal. But the past 3 years had been a little hollow. And so, I came back to the only place I knew. I'm glad you did. Kakashi smiled. We're happier with you around. He paused and then asked, were you able to deal with everything after the war? I recall our last conversation. I drink because of it. Otherwise, I've accepted it. You're always welcome to come and talk to me. I just came back, you know? I was your sensei. Do I have a place in Konoha? Kakashi didn't immediately respond. If not, I'll shake your hand and wish you well. You have a place. I'll just need to explain things to the council. But I'm the Hokage. The man shrugged indifferently. We just need to deal with the Iwagakure issue. That is a matter for tomorrow. I want to go to my mother's house and sleep. Kakashi lifted his arm and placed it on Naruto's shoulder. Smiling warmly, he said, I'm truly happy that you came back, Naruto. Sakura and your friends have also missed you. That's good to know, Naruto said, standing up with his bottle. Sasuke will also return. Did you speak to him? Yes. About a month ago. Guren? And Kumo's Jinchuriki? I'll sleep a lot better knowing that. And I can defend you better. Sensei will always protect his students, Naruto said. Guren is in the water country. Yugito should be back in Kumagakure, safe and sound. Iwagakure is an issue, and I'm happy to discuss it. It's Jinchuriki? Both are dead. So, we're not talking about returning them. Besides, one of them killed Shizune. Tsunade closed her eyes, ready to go back to sleep after a shift at the hospital. She only had them closed for a few minutes before she sensed someone staring at her, lying on her bed. God damn it, Jiraiya, she shouted, opening her eyes and readying herself to pounce on the Sannin. To her utter shock, it wasn't her perverted friend, it was the man with the blue eyes she hadn't seen in 3 years. His sharp features were still as striking as ever, and his warm smile seemed to pierce right through her. Tsunade turned red with anger. Anger bubbled up inside of her as she glared at him. In a second, her bed was broken, her fist had punched through the floor, and Naruto was plastered against the wall. The old woman punches as hard as ever. Tsunade lifted her head and glared at him. It's nice to see you. I arrived earlier and was shocked to find Jiraiya-sensei sitting by your bed. I thought there might be something going on, but the atmosphere just reeked of gloom, it was suffocating. I even considered going back. Why didn't you? I'm not welcome here. You just disappeared after the war. I'm not welcome? He asked again. Tsunade lunged at him, attempting to shatter his rib cage with her monstrous punches. However, Naruto did not allow the attack to hit him. His right hand moved swiftly, and he grabbed her arm just below the elbow. A slight shockwave resulted from the action, causing cracks to appear on the wall behind him, with large fissures spreading across it. Naruto smiled warmly and then yanked the God Hokage toward him. He grabbed her tightly, wrapping both arms around her. Tsunade was frozen for a few seconds before she tried to break free, however, Naruto's grip remained locked. After struggling for some time, she dropped her shoulders in defeat. I've missed you, Buchan. The next day, a blonde and a pinkette stood at his door in the morning. Naruto would have preferred no one knocking on his door. But, he couldn't ignore the delightful presence of Ino, or who could ignore Sakura's presence? News spreads quickly. You're really back. Sakura nearly had tears in her eyes. She didn't even waste time jumping at him. It seemed as if he just needed to leave and not have to wear Sasuke's mask to gain any bit of her affection. In the flesh, Naruto replied awkwardly and then placed his hands behind Sakura's back. Her chest was still small, but she smelled pleasant and was warm. Ino cleared her throat, and Sakura jumped away from him like a frightened cat. Don't worry, I'm not going to tell Sasuke, Ino said in a flat tone, arms crossed over her chest. If he comes back, that is, she added the dagger for effect. That's nice, Naruto said with mild sarcasm. Come here, he said, holding out both his hands. Ino smiled and then closed the distance between them. Slap. The 5 fingers had him seeing rainbows and rabbits. She hit him with a flashy one across his cheek. He was certain anyone passing by on the street would have heard it. Naruto rubbed his cheek, and then smiled. I earned that. I should have hit the jackpot. You don't play like that. Naruto replied, stepping away from Ino. She said, you deserve it. You just disappeared after everything. Her voice was shrill and filled with pain. Had she taken their fun times too seriously? He wouldn't blame her either way. He glanced at Sakura and saw her nodding her head in agreement with her friend's anger. Girls stuck together, it seemed. Which friend did he have to convince to back him up? Come in and shut the door, Naruto said, his voice flat. Ino slammed the door behind her and then followed him toward the kitchen. Things were over. She pulled a chair beside the kitchen table and settled down. I was just busy cleaning up, Naruto said, pressed against the kitchen counter, watching the girls over his shoulder. It's really good to see you both in fine health. It's been a long 3 years. So, what's your excuse? I have nothing. Ino scoffed. So you just decided to abandon your friends without a word. You know how worried we were about you? We even wondered if you were alive or not. The pain was gut-wrenching. It was surprising. Naruto had never quite thought Ino would be upset over his disappearance. Well, at least not to this extent. If he told her the truth, it would just upset her further. I had a journey, and I completed it, Naruto replied in a quiet tone. He glanced at Sakura. Sasuke will also return soon. Sakura's spirits were lifted. She nearly exploded with excitement. Really? Yes, really. That is great. She clapped her hands, exuding her happiness. She would have even shed tears if her beloved had come back. There was a deep hole in her heart without both her teammates. Maybe they could go back to being a team again. After all, they were students of the Sannin. Sakura was confident in her abilities. It wasn't like before when she had to depend on them. She could heal and fight. On a serious note, where were you? Ino asked him. I'm also curious. You just disappeared from the battle. If not for the Godime Raikage, nobody would truly know if you killed his predecessor and the Tsuchikage. Naruto sighed. Did he really have to give out explanations all the time? Was this the price of being a famous? Do you know how many people I've killed? Naruto asked, trying to be creative. If he didn't deal with this now, he would be asked over and over again. Sakura opened her mouth and then closed her eyes. She'd seen what happened when Iwagakure unleashed their Jinchuriki. The horrors Naruto had brought to both enemies were stories of legend that some people even questioned whether they were real. The truth was, Naruto had killed thousands in the war. Sakura couldn't imagine what that could do to anyone. She couldn't even imagine killing anyone. She was a medic, she saved lives, not ended them. Failing to save a person had been a torture for her when she first began, but now she understood how it felt to be on the other side of the blade. While Konoha celebrated, many families cursed his name for being the butcher. Everybody knows, Ino said with indifference. We studied all of your battles, the corpses you left behind. It was gruesome. She smiled bitterly. Father always wondered if you'd ever be the same person. But then again, it seems to run in the family. Ino. Sakura looked shocked that her friend would say that. Naruto just cackled. It is fine, Sakura, he said. It seems to run in the family. Someone has to do the dirty work. Without what we do, people like Ino would be the first ones to die when Konoha is invaded, if she isn't running behind her father. I can fight my own battles. I'm sure you can. Naruto replied with a roll of his eyes. Regardless, I didn't want to return. I just wanted to have some time to sort out my thoughts. I've given everything for Konoha to be safe. Next time, it will be my life. You know, sometimes you kind of wonder if it is even worth it. But seeing you two here, I think it is worth it. I'm so. Sakura trailed off as an Anbu appeared in the kitchen. Don't be like Anbu, no manners, Naruto said with a deep frown. I'm going to ward my house. They are waiting for you. Who are they? Please come with me. Naruto sighed. It seems I'll be busy. But let's have dinner later on. With everyone. I'll buy. We can catch up. Alright everyone, that's it for the video. If you enjoyed it, please feel free to leave a like and subscribe. Also, feel free to check out my Patreon page in the description. I post the full stories over there immediately, along with many other extra stories you guys can enjoy. Anyways, until next time, peace.